Brickyard live show. We appreciate you tuning in, whether you're watching us after the fact, whether you're watching us live right now. We do appreciate you taking the time out of your busy day to escape and talk about what we love, football, which is why we are here today. And we are going to be previewing every single game for, yes, it's already here, week 5 of the NFL season, and we are also going to be handing out our quarterly grades for every single NFL team. That's right, we're not like one of these shows that only talks about the Cowboys, that only talks about their favorite team. We talk about every single team in the NFL, which is why you keep coming back for more in this show. Then we're also going to be going over some trade rumors for Devontae Adams, but there was the WNBA playoffs, and those happened, and we needed to cover those. And okay, we covered the WNBA playoffs. So now that we have that out of the way, there was officially word from the Las Vegas, formerly Oakland Raiders, that Devontae Adams is officially on the trade block. They are listening to offers. The Raiders not really in the place they want to be right now, and maybe they're looking to get some capital, rebuild that offensive line, or maybe get a running game to help out Gardner Minshew here. But Devontae Adams wants bigger and brighter things, especially for the end of his career, maybe one last bag. So, Devontae Adams, where do you think he's going to go? What are the interwebs saying? What documents do you have to reveal on potential pursuers of Devontae Adams, who at one point was the most technically sound receiver in the NFL and a hands down top 5 wide receiver on everyone's list just a few years ago?
Yeah, so the interwebs are saying that it's going to be the Jets, the Saints, or potentially the Steelers. And of those three, my personal favorite would be the Steelers. Right now, their offense is being really sound, and that's really with George Pickens, and the other receivers are a little bit weaker compared to the rest of the division. So, my perfect scenario for him would be going to a team, either the Steelers or Ravens. I feel like would be perfect. Somebody in the AFC North. I know the Browns are linked to him. I would hate to see him go to the Cleveland Browns and probably end his career there. So, early favorites, I would say the Steelers would be one, the Ravens would be two, and then after that, I mean, I don't want to see him go to the Jets. I don't want to see him go to the Saints. I think those are my two favorites. I think, yeah, Steelers and Ravens are my favorite choices.
Yeah, Steelers and Ravens definitely makes sense there. I think though the Jets do make a lot of sense for Devonte Adams because the Jets defense has still shown that it can be very good. And while they did lose to the Denver Broncos, one thing that the Jets are desperately missing at this point is what firepower. And I am no fan of the New York Jets this season. However, I think with Aaron Rodgers, if you can have a combination of Garrett Wilson and Devontae Adams, that would be his best wide receiver duo in a very long time. And I think you'd have to go all the way back to Greg Jennings, Jordy Nelson, to really kind of replicate a wide receiver duo like that for the Green Bay Packers, because you did have Jordy Nelson. Devontae Adams was still coming into his own, and then it was Devontae Adams and Randall Cobb. And you want to talk about a guy who is very inconsistent. You never know where he was going to be on a given moment. You think he's in Walmart, then he shows up in a Target later, and then you find him in a thrift store. You just don't know what you were getting with Randall Cobb at that point. And then Aaron Rodgers leaves. Now he's with the Jets. I do think Devontae Adams and Garrett Wilson could be the best duo that Aaron Rodgers has had since Greg Jennings and Jordy Nelson there. And it could push the Jets into at least into that tier with maybe the Steelers, where they're at least a legitimate wild card team and they're not trying to scrape by with every single win. And then Aaron Rodgers already has chemistry there. I think the Baltimore Ravens, though, would be my number two option, because if you look at it, Zay Flowers has been good, but they need a wide receiver who's a little bit older, a little bit more of a veteran presence, who can take someone like Zay Flowers under his wing, show him about how to be a professional, and who isn't going to make those extremely stupid mistakes that's going to cost them the game, like what Zay Flowers did versus the Kansas City Chiefs when he fumbled the ball. And then you pair him with Derrick Henry and Lamar Jackson, and you have some okay tight ends. I mean, Isaiah Likely, he comes and he goes with the wind, similarly to Randall Cobb, who we just talked about. And then Mark Andrews is a offensive lineman and has put up a donut in back-to-back weeks in fantasy. So I think if you're the Ravens, you're really trying to get Devontae Adams. But I think a dark horse candidate that could just come out and scoop him up, Kansas City Chiefs.
You think the Chiefs can trade for him in division potentially?
Potentially. I mean, I don't think the Raiders are on the Chiefs level, and I think kind of getting rid of Davante Adams is almost a surrender because the Raiders don't have a chance to beat the Chiefs. So you could trade him in division, but they're a team that at the last minute, if the offer is right, I feel like we've seen crazier trades happen before in division.
Yeah, I think with the Chiefs, if they got Devontae, and then let's say Rashid Rice isn't out for the season, like people are thinking he might be, you go into the playoffs and you have Devontae and Rashid Rice and Xavier Worthy as your three. I feel like that's a really nasty combo. And you also have the Juju's and McCole Hardmans of the world. I mean, I feel like at that point, that's probably the best receiver core we've seen for the Chiefs since probably even the Tyreek Hill era, honestly. I feel like that might be his best receiver core he's ever had at that point. Because even in the Tyreek Hill era, his number two was Demarcus Robinson, McCole Hardman. That might be his best receiver core he's ever had at that point.
Yeah, no, and you would also have like a trio of receivers that all does something different. You have your new fast wide receiver that the Buffalo Bills gifted to you, and I loved when people were talking about when the Kansas City Chiefs drafted him, and we pointed that out on this show about how when the Buffalo Bills and the Kansas City Chiefs trade, it is a win for the Kansas City Chiefs, and then people are like, "Oh, Xavier Worthy is just fast. He's not actually going to be a good wide receiver. He still has to play receiver." And so far this season, he's been absolutely electric, and those Bills fans, per usual, with the show, and the theme of the show has been Bills fans fuck around and find out. Well, you fucked around and found out again. You don't think Xavier Worthy could have helped you out with this team? And then you have the speedster, the technical wide receiver in Devontae Adams, and then you also have some other great players on your team like Kelsey, who's going to be able to give you a game or two. He's kind of like Gronk at the end of his career at this point, but Travis Kelsey is saving himself and clearly pacing himself throughout the season. Then Rashee Rice, I don't really think he's going to come back this season with the way his knee was crunched, but if he does, that would be another plus for the Chiefs. But I feel like it's unlikely for the Chiefs to get him. They're probably, if you can trade him outside of the division, you probably do. But I could see them at the last moment maybe scooping him up. But if I'm Devontae, I would want to go the Ravens or the Jets, though, because I played with Aaron Rodgers, and the Ravens were right there with the Kansas City Chiefs last season. And then you basically replaced um, J.K. Dobbs with Derrick Henry this season. I mean,
Yeah.
that's a pretty huge upgrade. And then Lamar, I mean, I would rather play with Aaron Rodgers if I'm Devontae just because I'm going to eat more. And Lamar's allergic to throwing to wide open receivers to win games. So I would say for him, he would probably rather go play with Aaron Rodgers.
Yeah, I think so too. If the Ravens do get Devontae, though, you still have most of your defense. You have Derrick Henry, who looks like 2019 Derrick Henry right now. And then you also have Zay Flowers, Devontae, and Isaiah Likely. Like that's a pretty lethal offense. That's a pretty hard offense to stop. Plus, you have obviously Lamar's running abilities. That team has no excuse not to beat the Chiefs this year. They had no excuse last year, but like this year, if you get Devontae too and Derrick Henry, you still can't beat the Chiefs. You're never beating the Chiefs ever. Just I would say stock up on as much as you can. The Chiefs were vulnerable this year with the injuries of Pacheco and Rashid Rice. I would say go all in. And if it doesn't work this year, then you might just be cursed. You might just never beat the Chiefs ever.
Yeah, especially like the other contenders, like the Bengals defense. Woof, has not looked good at all this season. And then the Texans have this weird complication and huge red flag where we don't look like a dominant team without Joe Mixon, which has been concerning. So I think the Ravens need to go in all in this year because this is probably going to be your last chance, and your window was probably last year, this year, and the year after that. And then Lamar probably only has another 5 elite MVP caliber years in the tank, because with these mobile quarterbacks, the fall off comes way sooner than you typically expect. We saw that with Russell Wilson. We've seen it with Cam Newton. And until one of them shows me otherwise, I'm just going to assume your career is going to be cut short. And it's the unfortunate reality of being a running quarterback in the NFL.
Yeah, and not only that, the fall off happens pretty dramatically. I mean, Russell Wilson in 2019 was in the MVP conversation for a long part of the season. And then 2021 comes around. He has one injury in 2020. 2021, he's absolutely abysmal with the Broncos. So, I mean, life comes at you quick for a mobile quarterback. As soon as you lose your burst, your career is just not the same. And I don't think Lamar's already 27. So if you're looking at the 5 year window, you're looking at 32. When did Russ start to regress? Right around 33. So I think that's appropriate overall.
Yeah. The funniest part about Devontae Adams being available is it's funnier to talk about the teams who are like, no, no, we're not trading for him. Nope, we don't need him. We can't afford him on our team. No, we don't need Devontae Adams, even though we don't have a running game. We don't have a number 2 wide receiver, and our defense is falling apart with Micah Parsons having a sprained ankle. But you know what we do have money for? Jerry Jones flying into practice on a private helicopter. And then right after he flies in, same day, in a private helicopter, you're talking about how you can't afford Devontae Adams. The irony is fucking hilarious, if you ask me, that both of those things happened on the same day. Jerry Jones flies in on a private helicopter, but no, we don't have enough money to afford Devontae Adams and compete for a Super Bowl. I mean, the Cowboys just being the Cowboys again. And I'm convinced, I said it last year after they brought back Mike McCarthy. I'm like, okay, if you needed any other more clear sign that this team does not care about winning, well, that would be it because of Mike McCarthy. And that's a good segue in, because get your notepad out, get your teacher's pen out, get your NFL encyclopedia out if you so dare, get your thinking cap out, because we're going to go over every single team and give them their quarterly review according to the Brickyard. And why not just start out with the Dallas Cowboys, who clearly need a second wide receiver? And we can go over and start with the NFC, and then we'll go the AFC East. We'll just do it by coast here. But my God, the Dallas Cowboys, I mean, you can't afford him, but you can
The
afford
Dallas
private helicopters.
the Dallas Cowboys, keep in mind the Dallas Cowboys are the most valuable team in all of sports. So the money part is not the problem. Not only that, what's probably going to cost Devontae Adams maybe a second or third round pick is something that you're willing to give up for somebody as good as Devontae Adams. So that's bullshit as well. And then thirdly, you just paid CeeDee Lamb and Dak Prescott. You paid Dak Prescott $60 million, and you can't afford Devontae Adams. That's a load of shit. Honestly, you can make the cap work. I don't want to hear that this is too expensive for us. You guys are in a situation where the Eagles don't look great, the Giants don't look great, and the Commanders are looking like world beaters, and they look like they're the best team. You need to compete in this division. Otherwise, you're not going to make the playoffs. And you're saying that you can afford Devontae Adams? What a load of horse shit. You're the Dallas Cowboys. It's like saying the Yankees can afford it. It's the same scenario. Yes, you can afford them. You just don't want to pay for him. That's literally all you're saying. You're saying, well, he's good, but it's the same shit that they did with Brandon Ayuk, and it's the same shit they did with Tyreek Hill. They don't care enough about winning. Is what it comes down to at the end of it, and they're going to suffer, which is going to end up with the Dallas Cowboys being not in the playoffs. Now, we're talking about grades. So we might as well start with the beloved Dallas Cowboys. For those who might have missed the last month, or maybe they forgot, this is how their season has gone. They blew out the Cleveland Browns 33-17. Then the next 2 weeks, they get torched by the New Orleans Saints, who the first 2 weeks looked like the Super Bowl favorites. And then they get killed by the Ravens. The score is deceitful. 28-6 was the score to start the fourth. And then they narrowly beat the New York Giants with Daniel Jones. Your grade for the Dallas Cowboys to this point with those 4 games, what is your overall grade as you get your pen and pencil, as you get your oracle, looking through each of their report cards?
Yeah, so looking for the report card for the Dallas Cowboys, the grade that I would give them, considering that Mike McCarthy is your head coach and has been very much Mike McCarthy, considering you've gotten blown out in 2 games, and then I knew right on cue in that Ravens game, I'm like, oh, Dak is about to put up a bunch of junkyards. And this has always been my gripe with the defenders of Dak Prescott that are like, just look at his stats, man. Because of shit like this, where he gets down bad and then the other team stops caring because they know they're going to win the game. Then he throws a bunch of junkyards in the fourth quarter. And then you also have a defense that does not look the same without Dan Quinn. You're struggling against mediocre competition, and then you beat the Cleveland P. Diddy rapist or grape for YouTube. That's what they like us to say, grapist, because they don't like the R word here. So you beat 2 of the bottom feeders in the league. So for the Dallas Cowboys, the first 4 weeks of the season, get a C.
I'm going to be a little bit meaner there. The Dallas Cowboys, I don't like what I saw against the Giants. They cannot run the football. In fact, they are one of the worst running football teams in all of football. You're relying on Rico Doyle as your number one running back and Zeke Elliott, who at this point I believe is 337 years old. And then not only that, why did you bring back Mike McCarthy? If we're looking at these first 4 games, this is a sign of trouble. I honestly feel like the Giants at one point looked better. If it wasn't for Malik Neighbors going out, I think the Giants would have won this game. So I feel like in my mind, they are 1-3, but they are 2-2. And in the 2 games that they lost, they got embarrassed, and then they beat the rapist. Congratulations. Like anyone else can't beat the rapist either. And then their next stretch of games, going into what will be our halftime review, they face the Steelers, Lions, 49ers, and Falcons the next 4 weeks. And I feel like they're going to lose every single one of those games. The Cowboys at this point get a D because I feel like this is just the beginning of what will be a failed season.
Yeah. D as in doubted, D as in Dallas, D as in Rico Doidle. And I was talking to my friend today about Rico Doidle, and he's like, yeah, I have him. I'm going to start him. I think he's better than Ezekiel Elliott. I'm like, just because he's less retarded doesn't mean he's not retarded, you know? That doesn't actually mean that he's a good running back. Like, oh, yeah, what a great showing from him. He got 46 yards. The Vegas bet the house on Rico Dartle this year. I thought the Cowboys were going to be in that 6 to 7 win range this season, and turns out they might actually be in that 6 to 8 win range here. So, which is why I gave them the C, because C for not surprised. Whereas we go over to their fellow divisional opponents that they just played, we have the New York Giants. So, what exactly has happened with the New York Football Giants so far this season? Who have they played? What have those games look like?
Yep. So week 1, the Vikings killed them 28-6. Then they had a really tough divisional game against the Commanders, which they lost 21-18. They beat the rapist Cleveland Browns, which that's a common theme that you'll see when we go through our grades. And then they just narrowly lost to the Cowboys on Thursday Night Football. And they are now 1-3. Devin Singletary running the ball well for them. And then Malik Neighbors doing his thing. So for the Giants, they are 1-3. They look, to me, in my eyes, exactly what I kind of expected, but honestly, maybe slightly better. Their defense has played pretty well. Malik Neighbors has been the best receiver in the draft so far. And Devin Singletary has surprised me. Do I feel like that's going to continue? Maybe not. But for now, even though they're 1-3, and even though I don't think they're a good football team, I feel like expectations in reality, I'm still the expectations were low, but they've slightly exceeded expectations for me. I'm going to give them a C plus.
You're gonna give him a C plus? Well, damn, Jackie, because I was gonna give him a C plus too for all of the reasons you just said. Where we have Brian Burns on that defense, and their defense that was good last year. It's what was kind of carrying them to the playoffs. I've compared this team this season to the Mitchell Trubisky led Chicago Bears under Matt Nagy when they had they traded for Khalil Mack, who is an absolute beast. Similarly, the Giants traded for Brian Burns, taking that defense to the next level. Now, Daniel Jones is a little bit more experienced at this point, and maybe he's not going to be as atrocious, but he still has his Daniel Jones isms, his Daniel Jones moments, and he's still not a quality starting quarterback in the NFL. As some people call him, he is the great white hope, but I kind of still refer to him as the great white dope. But that being said, he hasn't looked as atrocious in years past. The expectations for Daniel Jones, wait a minute, there aren't any expectations for Daniel Jones, which is kind of a great place to be in your career when you're already able to just go out there, play freely. With this team, and it's not just Saquon Barkley reliant. They're actually able to get their balls to the receivers at this point. So I also gave them a C plus since they are better than I thought they would be, but they are still not a top tier. They still are not an impressive football team where they have to hold their opponent under 15 points to win the game, because the most this offense is going to produce on a given day is going to be 24 points. And the floor that this offense is going to produce on a given day is 0 points.
Yeah, I think you nailed it there. And for the Giants, like their offense, I mean, the year that they were 9-7-1, it was the same thing. So the thing is that they're going to be bad enough where they're not going to make the playoffs, but they're going to be good enough that they're not going to get one of these top 5 quarterbacks that could come into the league next year. So they're still going to be stuck. So the Giants, like, they're actually in a pretty terrible spot if you look at it historically. I feel like they're not going to get, whether it be a Ken Ewers, a Carson Beck, whoever it might be, Shador Sanders. I don't think they're going to get one of those 3 guys, and they're probably still going to be stuck with Daniel Jones.
Yeah, they may still be stuck with Daniel Jones, but we will see. I feel like the Giants' motto this season is aim for failure and we'll always succeed.
Yeah, I think that's fair. Now we go to a team that a lot of people anointed as the best team in the division, and honestly, like one of the Super Bowl contenders of the NFC, the Philadelphia Eagles, or should I say the Philadelphia Shitty Cheesesteaks. Yes, that's right. I'm continuing on from last night's stream. Fuck the Philadelphia cheesesteak, dumb cheese whiz steaks. Fuck that.
Fuck it.
So this is what the Eagles have done. The first week they went to Brazil. They killed Jordan Love, meaning not. I don't mean killed him in the scoreboard. I mean literally killed him for 3 weeks. They narrowly defeat the Packers. Then they lose to the Falcons on a, get this, a prime time fourth quarter drive that Kirk Cousins led to win the game on a prime time Monday night game. All right. And then the very next week, they narrowly beat the Saints 15-12. The offense looks terrible. And then this last week, they got killed by the Bucks. So 2 losses, 2 wins. 1 win against the Saints that was 15-12. And then the 2 losses were to Tampa, who killed them in the divisional round last year. And then the Falcons, that was due to a Kirk Cousins prime time fourth quarter clutch drive to win the game. Your thoughts on the Eagles so far through the first quarter?
Yeah, the city of Philadelphia is an insult to cities in general across America. This is supposed to be the city of freedom, to be honest. I look at the city, and this was the city that founded our nation, where people had a dream. They were getting taxed too much on tea, of all things. That's what drove them over the edge. A tax on tea. A revolution was started, and the city of Philadelphia is now being defamed even more than it has been over the past few years, where it's kind of falling apart. And the Philadelphia Eagles decided, hey, wait a minute. Once glorious, we got to the top, and now we're being pushed all the way back down to the bottom after losing the Super Bowl. Let's see how bad and how ugly this can get for the Philadelphia Eagles. I mean, Saquon Barkley goes there. He leaves Daniel Jones and he thinks he's getting a legitimate quarterback and he doesn't have to be the entire offense. Well, it turns out that he has to be the entire offense, and Jalen Hurts, until he proves otherwise, that Super Bowl year was a fluke, because outside of that stretch, we have not seen it from Jalen Hurts. He looks disinterested in the games. He's still way too young to be playing this bad in his career. And the fact that you look like a bottom dweller without AJ Brown now is a huge red flag. And then you're like, you know what? We fired our offensive coordinator because that was the problem, right? So let's bring in a offensive coordinator who is fired from Dallas of all places, then was fired from the Chargers of all places, even though it's a new head coach. So give him a pass for that. But you think that's a good idea? Where I feel like Kellen Moore is just a name that people know more than an actually legitimately good offensive coordinator. And then your defense has the pieces around it to be good. It's just not that impressive at all, and neither are the Philadelphia Eagles. So, with all things considered, with the expectations of this team, they get an F half plus.
An F half
I can't
plus.
give
Damn.
them a complete F because you did win a good game against Green Bay in Brazil, albeit you killed Jordan Love, and then you beat a gritty Saints team where it was 15-12. So I'll give you credit for that. So I'll give you a half plus instead of a full on F for the Philadelphia Eagles.
I can't say that the Eagles are failing so far, but they're certainly not passing. They're certainly not continuing on. Do I think that they've been worse than the Cowboys? Arguably, I would say. I mean, the Eagles' offense, I mean, it's really just been Saquon and Dallas Goddard, who's been their number one receiver so far. I'll give them a D plus as well. I gave the Cowboys a D plus. I feel like they're both disappointing me in similar ways. Cowboys maybe a little worse. I'll give the Eagles a D plus. They can still turn it around. I don't think their season's lost, but I don't like what Nick Sirianni has been for them so far. Something is wrong in the air in Philadelphia, and it's not just the cheese whiz. I think it's something much worse, a much more foul stench, and it might just be the Flyers and Sixers fans for all I know, but there's something wrong in Philly.
Yeah. Yeah, Philly's great at naming teams too. They're like the Philadelphia Phillies?
The
Genius, guys.
Philadelphia
What a great team.
Philadelphias.
It's like the
Congratulations.
Boston Bosts. Like, what are you talking about? The Philadelphia Phillies? Come on, man. Pull it
Yeah,
together. Bring back Rocky.
bring back Rocky. Last team in the NFC East to go over is the biggest surprise maybe in all of football, which is the Commanders. Commanders, what have they done for us through the first month? Let's see. First game, they lose to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers 37-20. First game for Jaden Daniels. Then piece things together, beat the Giants divisional 21-18. And then the last 2 weeks, it's been them putting on a high flying performance, beating the Bengals on Monday Night Football, and then marching down to the desolate desert of Arizona and destroying the Arizona Cardinals and their cupcake defense. They are now 3-1. They are in the driver's seat. Their schedule is actually pretty easy the next month. So when our second quarter grades come out in a month's time, I feel like they could be in an even better spot. Commanders, grade for them for the first 3 months.
Yeah, so for the Commanders grade, if we're staying specifically with the expectation that they had coming into it, when you think of everything that the Commanders represent, being named after FedEx, one of the worst ways to receive a package here, having sewage leaking into your locker room, and then not really knowing what to expect from Cliff Kingsbury. And then you have a tough first week 1, you're able to bounce back, and then make history where you're the first team to not get a touchdown and win versus the New York Football Giants, literally inventing new ways to lose. And then Jaden Daniels had not had a touchdown. And then, okay, following that up, Caleb Williams. And this will come back around, walks up to his punter and he's like, yeah, you're not going to be doing a lot of that this season. Well, turns out it was actually Jaden Daniels' punter because then he goes to Cincinnati and they do not have a single punt in that game on Monday Night Football for a rookie quarterback where it just clicked like that. And then you go to Arizona and you only punt once. The Washington Commanders, the please change your name team, the get a new stadium team who found potentially their franchise quarterback. We'll see how a full half decade plays out with Jaden Daniels, but as of right now, I'm gonna give them an A minus. Just because you did lose in week one. It took you a few weeks to get going. But if you can keep up on this trajectory of absolutely running through teams and your defense can also catch up to that, which is really my concern with this team because the Bengals were also able to score every single time and the Giants were able to move the ball on you. I'll be able to give them an A plus, but for right now, I am going to give them an A minus.
I think that's fair. Jaden Daniels, I feel like he started to piece things together. He's got 7 total touchdowns, 1 turnover. He's got the highest completion rating in the month of September ever now. And then Terry McLaurin finally has somebody. Brian Robinson has been good. Cliff Kingsbury, somebody who was almost blacklisted from the NFL, went to Thailand for the summer after leaving Arizona. Just went completely disarray. He's actually been pretty good for them. Maybe his career has been rejuvenated in Washington. Dan Quinn looks like he's running a nice unit there. So I'll give them an A. I won't give them an A plus either for the same reasons you mentioned, but Commanders, they deserve at least an A minus. I'll give them an A. I like where they are, and I think they're going to be building on that success this upcoming month.
All right, and that is the NFC East. Y'all have been graded for the first 4 weeks of the NFL season. Thank you for your participation in this game we know and love called the National Football League, the greatest game, the greatest league on the face of planet Earth, second to none. And then we shift over to the red side of it, the evil side of it, the dirty AFC East, and God, it is a stinker of a division this year. Should we just get the worst out of the way and agree that if we could find a grade for the Miami Dolphins sufficient, we would? I can't give them an F because, they deserve no grade. They deserve nothing. You don't get a rating because that's how awful you've been. That's how pathetic you've been. Okay, you first of all let the Jacksonville Jaguars score 17 points on you. You let them score 17 points on you, which is completely mind-blowing, which how pathetic the Jacksonville Jaguars are at this point. Then you get completely shellacked, no pun intended, by the Buffalo Bills. Your franchise quarterback that you just paid gets knocked out of the league, maybe indefinitely for his career. Prayers up to Tua. Hopefully, he is doing well and his family is okay. And then you get completely dismantled again the very next week, and you thought it was okay to roll out Skylar Thompson, and he ends up getting hurt, and then you get blown out by Tennessee of all teams, who was looking for a win, and you get okay, it wasn't even Will Levis going off and having a white Jameis Winston moment. It was Mason Rudolph, the guy who likes dropping gamer on the NFL field. That guy, you got taken out by him, so you don't get a grade. You get nothing for the Miami Dolphins. You don't deserve an F. That's too good for you.
I disagree with the letter grade thing. I do think that they deserve a grade, but I do think
No, they
F
don't.
is a little too high. Let's summarize the Dolphins, right? They narrowly beat the Jacksonville Jaguars on a last second field goal. And then every other game they've been actually just bullied and terrible. They are the only team in the NFL who has not held a lead for the first month of the season. Now, the quarterback situation, is it all their fault? Maybe not, but at the same time, you did run out Tyler Huntley last week when you knew Tua's probably going to be out for some time. Skylar Thompson should have never been your backup, but he got hurt as well. This team, I think the only appropriate rating I can give them is the lowest possible letter in the alphabet, which is a Z, which is fitting for them because when I watch them play, I fall asleep. Devon A. Train, he can't run for some reason if Tua isn't behind center. Tyreek Hill, he can't catch passes if Tua is not behind center. Jalen Waddle, I don't know if he went to Antarctica and hung out with the rest of the Penguins. He's over there somewhere. I don't know what is going on with this Dolphins team, but this team, it doesn't deserve an F because there are other teams that deserve an F. So the Dolphins get a Z, the lowest possible letter in the alphabet, the 26th letter of the alphabet, Z. And they honestly get a couple of Z's because I'm falling
Z
asleep
minus?
watching them.
Z
They get a
minus
Z.
minus?
They get Z Z Z Z Z. That's what they get.
Yeah, they get a Z for Aziz Ansari because they might date grape you.
Exactly. So the Dolphins.
God.
I don't think there's going to be a team with a lower rating. Also, keep in mind that they have the least amount of points scored in the league, and they have the worst point differential in the league. And this is a team that was supposed to be a playoff team. They're not going to be a playoff team this year. Woof. So
Woof.
now let's talk about a team that was actually supposed to be the worst team in the league, which was the New England Patriots. What have the Patriots done for us lately? New regime. We got Gerard Mayo. First week, they upset the Cincinnati Bengals 16-10. Played a competitive game against the Seahawks in week 2, and then they went back down to earth. The Jets dominated them, and the 49ers dominated them as well. It's been a mixed bag. They're 1-3. They were competitive the first 2 weeks, and now they are back to not scoring points and Jacoby Brissett being massacred by that offensive line. Patriots for me, they have still been competitive the first 2 weeks, and the last 2 weeks I think are just more of the reality setting in. But that being said, they've surprised me through the first month because they've been better than I thought. Still think they're not a great team. I'm going to give them I'll give them a C plus. I feel like this is where I expected them to be. They can pass, but I don't think that they are a great team. Maybe I'll give them a B minus. I'll give them a B minus actually. They beat the
A
Bengals.
B minus. Oh my
They're still one and
god.
three. They still have a terrible offense. Ramondre Stevenson's getting benched. They're still not excellent. I think B minus is appropriate.
Good God. Wow, you really are a man of love because giving the Patriots a B minus is absolutely wild. Because we talk about on the show how September is the preseason, how bad teams you typically play their best early on in the season. Well, you played your best and wow, you scored 16 points and you won a game. The only game you've won is because you scored 16 points. And when you have a new head coach, what you want to see is an energy infusion to the franchise. You want to see the team get excited, keep getting better from week to week. And after that first win versus the Bengals, the Patriots look like they're just getting worse each week and they keep getting exposed more and more. And as the season goes on, as the first quarter went on, it looked like the Patriots were getting worse. They gave you a little bit of hope with a close loss versus the Seattle Seahawks at home. Then you got shellacked by the Jets on the road, and then you got shellacked by the San Francisco 49ers on the road as well here. So with the Patriots, your offensive line is not good enough. You're potentially going to bench Ramondre Stevenson because of his fumble issues for Antonio Gibson. Really? That's where we're at this point. And then you rolled into the season like, we don't need any wide receivers. That's just not an idea. And you have Drake May on your team. You know Jacoby Brissett is not the answer. And he's just going out there and getting murdered. And now the Patriots just don't have really any hope anymore. And Christian Gonzalez went down. Matthew Judon is gone down now, and the defense has been exposed in 2 games this year. Sure, you were close in a couple games, but you did this to yourself by not having any wide receivers and not doing what you needed to do in the offseason. So for me, you get a D plus plus.
Two pluses at least, right? At least they're still passing, right?
Yeah, you got a win, so that is still passing, but you had a close game and a win, so those are your 2 pluses there. Those but you've gotten worse the past 2 weeks. A lot worse, and it's gonna be even bad. And now is Gerard Mayo hired because of his last name because Kraft's brand sells mayonnaise? Like, is that
Maybe.
why he's the head coach? Why don't we have Mike
Also,
Vrabel here?
yeah, you know what? I think this Dolphins game that comes up this upcoming week that we'll preview soon enough, I think that's going to be the all-telling sign if the Patriots are going to be completely pathetic. If they lose to the Dolphins, who have not had a lead all season, I'll sell any bit of hope that the Patriots might have this year for winning anything more than the one game that they've already won. B minus because they've been competitive for first 2 games, but otherwise, I don't have much hope for them.
All right. Which brings us to 2 and
The New
2,
Jersey,
the New
the New
Jersey
Jersey,
East Rutherford Jets.
The New Jersey Boogers, they're back. What happened for them so far? Let's see. Monday Night Football, you and I watching this in Austin. They get shellacked by the 49ers. Okay. Week 1, Aaron Rodgers coming off an Achilles injury, whatever. Then
Normal.
they beat the Titans. Really tough one there. The Patriots, they dominate. Really tough one there. And then probably the candidate for the worst game of the year so far, which was the Broncos Jets game last week, 10-9 that they lost. Where in the world was Brees Hall? We don't know. Where in the world was Garrett Wilson? We don't know. 2-2. It's been, to say it's been a mixed bag for them would be an understatement. The Jets so far, I don't know. For me, I don't think Aaron Rodgers is washed. I think some people are a little bit of hyperbole there. I think he's shown flashes. He's also going to be 41 this upcoming year, so maybe cut him some slack. But um, I can't give them a B rating because I don't think they've impressed me. They're a team that might be in the playoff mix. They might not be. I feel like I should give them the grade you gave the Patriots. I'll give them a C plus plus because honestly, it's been 2 games that were horrible and 2 games that were decent enough. And at the end of the day, the most they've scored is 24. So I'll give them a C plus plus.
Yeah, the most they've scored is 24, and 14 of those points were from Adam Lazard. How crazy is that? Who had that on their bingo card this NFL season where Adam Lazard is out here getting more than half of the Jets' points in the game where they score the most points all season? And then for the first game, Aaron Rodgers, him losing to the San Francisco 49ers is basically like humans needing to drink water at this point. It's just the way it is. But you come out there, you beat the Tennessee Titans, which was a solid win for you. And then you go out there, you beat the Patriots, which was a nice win there, but only putting up 9 points versus the Denver Broncos. You're at home in this game in the rain versus a rookie quarterback. You were supposed to have the advantage in this game. All you needed to do was get 4 field goals in this game, get more than 10 points. And this is why you brought in Aaron Rodgers and he turned into Zach Wilson in the rain. So, with that game fresh in my mind, I'm going to give the Jets an O for ow, my eyes.
That's fair. I think that's fair. Then we move to the Buffalo Bills. This is a game, this is another team. So far, they came back against the Cardinals in week 1. They won 34-28. They annihilated the Dolphins, who we gave a Z rating, and some of us didn't give them a single rating because they didn't deserve it. The Jacksonville Jaguars, who we'll go over, they annihilated there. And then week 4, they faced the Ravens, who I've heard is pretty good. And they got shellacked 35-10. James Cook was missing, did not get off the bus. Overall rating for the Bills so far, it's been 3 really good games with 1 not so great game for the Bills. I'll let you go first before I give my ratings, but Buffalo Bills so far through the first month.
I mean, yeah, if the Super Bowl was played in September against the Jacksonville Jaguars, the Buffalo Bills might win it every single year. This team is an absolute wagon in September, especially going up against inferior competition there. You beat the Cardinals, who have not looked that great since their win versus the Rams. They haven't been good since week 2. And then you beat probably the 2 worst teams in the league back to back. And just because Josh Allen dropped 47 points on the Jacksonville Jaguars, people are like, he's easily the MVP of this league. He's the best player in this league. There's no questioning Josh Allen is the best player in September. And if we're looking at the strength of competition, and then you go out there, all eyes on you, Sunday Night Football. This is your time to shine here. And you put up 10 points. Give me a break with this Buffalo Bills team. It is literally the same cycle year in and year out with this team, which is why I'm going to give the Buffalo Bills a B minus. I mean, you could have gotten if you went out there and played competitive against the Baltimore Ravens, maybe I'd be generous and give you an A minus. But the fact that you look that pathetic when the season is starting to ramp up here, Derrick Henry has the longest run in Ravens history. Yes, history is literally being made against you. And then Josh Allen looked around for the first time. He went up against a legitimate defense all season because God knows the Cardinals don't have a legitimate defense. God knows the Dolphins don't have a legitimate defense. And the Jaguars don't have a legitimate defense. Then you go up against the Ravens and suddenly you drop 10 points and you realize, wait a minute, maybe we don't actually have weapons. That's crazy when Stephon Diggs is gone. So for all those receivers Josh Allen was so proud of for not chasing stats, congratulations, you don't have any firepower anymore besides yourself.
Well, my tone might be a little bit more glass half full for the Bills because for me, my expectations for the Bill going into this season was they lost literally their entire defense. They lost Stephon Diggs. They lost coin toss Gabe. So I was expecting the Bills to be not the best team. I was actually expecting the Jets or Dolphins to be potentially the division winners. And so far, that take didn't age well. For the Bills, I mean, the thing that I'll say positively about them is Josh Allen has been taking care of the ball. He's been dispersing it across. He's got 70% completion rating. Hasn't thrown a pick yet this year either. So, I mean, their offense, I don't think their offense is great. And I think like they face the Texans this week. How will that fare? I feel like against top level teams, they could struggle. But overall, I'm still relatively impressed with what I've seen from the Bills so far this year. Josh Allen's been efficient. This past game, I mean, the Ravens defense is no joke either. So I'll give them some slack there. But at the end of the day, like if we're looking at the Super Bowl window, we're looking at the contenders. Can I put them in the same level with the Ravens or the Chiefs or the Texans or the Bengals or really any of the teams that you'd put in the Super Bowl contenders list? I can't because their number one is Keon Coleman, who should have been Xavier Worthy. Then after that, it's Khalil Shakur. You have Dalton Kincaid. James Cook is a nice running back, but they just don't have enough oomph offensively. And their defense, honestly, like it's great that they can shut down Tyler Huntley and Trevor Lawrence, who is the biggest draft disappointment of the last decade. I still, I'm still pretty happy with what I've seen from them. I'll give them a B plus.
A B plus. Wow. Man of love on this show. The Bob Marley of football out here being generous. I call it like I see it. You call it with love with these teams, giving the Bills a little pat on the head, giving them their warm blanket and cookie before they go to bed. So credit to you for having a heart.
I have a heart. Now, what divisions should we grade next?
Let's go to the South.
AFC South or NFC South?
Let's stay in the AFC. Let's get that
Okay.
division over with because there's about two teams in that division that's worth talking about, and the other ones easy, easy grade.
Okay. Well, let's go worst to first again. Let's talk about the Jacksonville Jaguars, who, by the way, who wants to know what's going on with the Jaguars? Well, they lost to the Dolphins. They somehow lost to Bill Cosby and the Browns. Then they lost. Didn't just lose, got annihilated by the Bills. And then this past week, losing to the Texans. They are the only winless team as of now. I'll pull up Trevor Lawrence's stat. He has 4 touchdowns in 4 games, and he is on pace to have 22 touchdowns and 6 picks. So Trevor Lawrence has been a complete disgrace. By the way, also completing half of his passes. QBR below 80. His numbers are actually worse than Deshaun Watson this year. And he is the prince that's promised. And so far, yeah, I don't know what's going on here. If we're going to give the Dolphins a Z, I feel like the Jaguars also deserve a Z. You are 0 and 4. You spent all this money to get coin toss Gabe from Buffalo. Last year, you went after Calvin Ridley. Nothing happened there. Travis Etienne, you gave a first round pick for, hasn't really panned out. And then, other than that, you have Daddy Long Arms on the other side of the ball, who has longer arms than Aiden Hutchinson, but just can't, I don't know, play football. Doug Peterson has turned into being the most fraudulent head coach. If it wasn't for literally the greatest playoff run in the history of the NFL, Nick Foles, a career backup, has literally a Eli Manning, but maybe better style run. Doug Peterson's a fraud, and so is Trevor Lawrence, and so is Gabe Davis, and so is Travis Etienne, and so is Trayvon Walker. This whole team are frauds, and they're 0-4. I look at their schedule. Moving forward, they face the Colts, who they'll lose to, the Bears, who they'll lose to, the Patriots in London. Maybe they win that game, maybe they don't. The Packers, they lose. The Eagles, they lose. The Vikings, the Lions, the Texans, the Titans, the Jets, the Raiders, the Titans again, and the Colts again. I smell maybe one win in that game. Maybe I'll give them two because I have a heart. But this team will probably be the worst team in the NFL if the Dolphins don't get in their way. They deserve multiple Z's, maybe more Z's than the Dolphins.
The most C's. Yeah, absolutely. And I'm going to invent another grade for this Jacksonville Jaguars team. And you did a good job summarizing everything with this team, but I'm going to give them a T for teleport this team to another universe, another dimension, another place where they can thrive and have fans because I feel like if this keeps going on, I don't think this may be a Doug Peterson problem. This may not even be a Trevor Lawrence problem. This may just be a cursed franchise problem where they're only good once every decade with this Jacksonville Jaguars team where you had the Blake Bortles era, which was the most successful era in Jacksonville Jaguars history. Is that fair to say? You're you had a lead against Tom Brady and the Patriots. You took a knee going into the locker room the year that had the worst quarterbacks in the conference championship in the history of the NFL and Blake Bortles, Case Keenum, and Nick Foles. Talk about a crazy year that was for the NFL. I think there should be some investigation. I think they should bring some priests around or whatever mage, wizard, whatever you want to send into Jacksonville. You can send it there and figure out what is going on with that franchise. How can we get this team fans? But T for teleport them to another universe.
I appreciate that. I think they deserve that. Jags get a Z and a T, and they are pathetic. We move on to the Tennessee Titans. This team is the most exciting 1-3 team to watch, and that's not necessarily a compliment when I say that. They lost to Caleb Williams in the Bears in week 1. First time a rookie has won week 1 since 2002. And then they lose to the Jets 24-17. Again, same score. They get killed by Malik Willis in week 3. And then they beat up on the Dolphins in week 4, led by none other than Mason Rudolph. So far, in my eyes, Will Levis leads the league in turnovers, but he also leads the league in memes as well. So, I mean, depends on what you watch football for. If you watch football for memes, then the Titans might deserve an A+. But if we're looking at it objectively, like we do for football, 4 touchdowns, 6 picks, QBRs below the 80s, I feel like I can't give them a passing grade. I'm going to give them a D- because the Titans
Yeah.
have been pretty interesting to watch. Interesting is the right word.
For some reason, though, with the Tennessee Titans, I can't stop watching them. And I kind of love this football team, and I hate that I do. And it's kind of a toxic relationship with the Tennessee Titans. I like the era with Mike Vrabel. And this Titans team this season is just so funny to watch with Will Levis and just seeing Brian Callahan just dying inside. Like, hey, man, stop being dumb, stop being stupid. Like in a press conference calling out Will Levis. And then Will Levis is like, I don't know. He's dropping sex tapes. He's talking about mayonnaise in his coffee. He's making some wildly, incredibly accurate throws. And then he's just making some wildly stupid and erratic plays. I can't take my eyes on this team for pure entertainment value alone. I'll give him a C plus. I'll give him a
That's
C plus for entertainment. No one expected the Titans to be good. Everyone thought they'd be the worst team in their division. Guess what? They're not the worst team in their division, so you earn a C plus because they're in the same division as the Jaguars. And at least you have a pulse. The Jaguars do not have a pulse. We talked about Trevor Lawrence's, watch the episode last week and find when we talk about the Jaguars game. We talked about his motivational speeches. Go find that short on our page. But oh man, time to get going, guys. You just gotta go out there and do it. So all right, do it on three. Do it. Break. All right. So at least
I'm
they're
gonna
fun to
give
watch.
I'll give the Titans an I for interesting. Like I said when I led the Titans segment, I for interesting. They are the greatest train wreck to watch in the league. Now we pivot to the Colts, who are actually a team worth talking about, and so is the other team we'll talk about. So far, they lost narrowly week 1 to the Texans 29-27. Then they lose to Malik Willis and the Packers in week 2 16-10. They beat the Bears in week 3 and they beat the Steelers in week 4 with Joe Flacco. So 2-2. First two games they lose, last two games they've won. Jonathan Taylor's coming alive. Anthony Richardson did get banged up, but it looks like he should be able to play against the lowly Jacksonville Jaguars in week 5. But what are your early sentiments on this Colts team and what you've seen?
I love watching this Indianapolis Colts team. Some of the games have been painful, but they're able to turn it around. It was a tough first week against the Houston Texans, but guess what? God, that was the most entertaining week where you just have that 60-yard bomb from Anthony Richardson. I was watching it in Houston, surrounded by Texans fans, where the chant was just, "Yes, Dan, Texans," in that game. And you made it a game, and then Green Bay has proven to be a really solid team. The Bears have a good defense as well. So you're able to go out there, beat a really good Steelers team, beat another Bears team that has a solid defense, and you're playing against quality competition, quality defenses. And Shane Steichen has proven that he is a good head coach in this league. Flacco comes in, and suddenly Josh Downs is getting involved. Suddenly Michael Pittman comes alive, and now that wide receiver core has really kind of been the lagging factor. Is that because of Anthony Richardson? Only time will tell as the season goes on. But right now, I'm going to give the Colts a B. I think you're just there. You're not overly disappointed, and I think 2-2 is fine for September, but you beat some quality teams in the Steelers who just allowed 23 points in the first 3 weeks, and you completely shattered that and scored more than 23 points in a single game versus the Steelers. And then you're able to hold down the Bears, and you're able to get a gritty win. And this is a team that has proven that they can win a shootout, and they can also win a tough, gritty defensive battle. And I've been impressed with the Colts, and this is a great, fun team to watch.
Yeah, I agree. I think B, I'm going to go with the B grade as well. It's been, I think their losses haven't been like terrible losses. Like you lose to the Packers, and maybe that wasn't the best Anthony Richardson game. But at the same time, I feel like the Packers are a really good team and they'll be competing for their division. And you lose to the Texans, who are Super Bowl contenders. Then you beat the Bears, who are a solid overall team. And then the Steelers that you beat as well. So you've beaten two good teams and you've lost to two good teams as well. Not only that, but this next month, you have cupcakes on your schedule. You have the Jaguars, who are pathetic. You have the Titans, who are erratic, like we mentioned. Then you face the Dolphins. These are 3 consecutive weeks of absolute scrubs on the field. Then you eventually face the Texans again. But realistically, like we're looking forward, the Colts are probably going to be 5-3 going into the half. So I like where they are. I think a B is an appropriate grade.
Yeah, 5-3 is a great record.
Absolutely. Then, last but certainly not least, we have the Houston Texans. What have we seen from the Texans? Well, they beat the Colts in week 1. They had a tough defensive game against the Bears, which they prevailed in week 2. Then they got destroyed by the Vikings in week 3, 34-7. And then they beat the Jags in week 4. So they are 3-1. And I mean, for me, my opinion of the Texans so far, they haven't been as impressive as I was expecting them to be. But it's September, and I think that they can still turn it together. They haven't played poorly necessarily, except for the Vikings game, really. So, with their expectations, I put them in the Super Bowl, and I still feel that they are a Super Bowl team. But from what I've seen for this point alone, just these 4 games, I'll give them a B minus. I think that they're still passing. They're not sinking by any means, but I'd like to see them be a little bit more dominant. They weren't dominant against the Jags. They got killed by the Vikings. And then I want to see them start to lock in and really start to play some dominant football. For now, I'll give them a B minus.
Yeah, you stole my grade. I was gonna give them a B minus as well. I mean, I want to see them be more dominant as well, especially versus a team like the Jacksonville Jaguars. And I felt like I felt like the Colts had a more dominant performance versus the Chicago Bears. You're in a dogfight versus them. Just the way you beat the Jaguars, I didn't like. I get it's a divisional matchup, but the Bills just hung 47 on them. And now this offense looks very one dimensional. I mean, I have Nico Collins on my fantasy team, so I'm not complaining, but it has been Nico Collins or bust for this team. Haven't really seen Tank Dell or Stephon Diggs really shine yet or this offense come together. Now, I think this is a team that is going to ramp it up as the end of the season comes along. But as far as the first quarter, a cool B minus. You're passing, but at the end of the day, the Texans right now just look like the kid who doesn't need a study and he can do just enough to get a B minus, which there's nothing wrong with that, but there's a point where we need to pick it up. So I agree with that.
Yeah, I think that they're an A plus caliber team, but they're playing like a B minus team.
And
Now,
that brings us to the NFC South here, which a lot of people had as the worst division in football. And it seems like they are slowly turning into what the NFC East was a couple of years ago, where everyone thought that that was going to be the worst division in football. And they ended up having three teams make the playoffs that year. And I don't think three teams are going to make the playoffs from this division, but it is a division where everyone wrote off the Saints. The Tampa Bay Buccaneers last year was a fluke. They're definitely not going to be better this year. And then the Atlanta Falcons with Kirk Cousins. Not a lot of people knew what to expect from them. People just picked them to win the division, even though he's coming off an Achilles injury. And then the Panthers, I mean, God, do we need to even say more about the Panthers than that? So let's start from the bottom and work our way up. Carolina Panthers, Andy Dalton plays the past 2 weeks. They look competitive again. Did they do enough to earn at least a grade above a F?
well, let's see. The first 2 weeks, they were well on pace to get. I'd have to reinvent a new letter to get a letter below a C because honestly, I was afraid that they were might having to go into totally different letters here. But they had the awareness to get rid, like just to not play Bryce Young because he looked terrible. Andy Dalton beats the Raiders and then plays competitively against the Bengals. I feel like to have the awareness Dave Canales had to be like, Bryce Young, you suck. I don't want to play you. I don't want to be the team that goes 0-17. So they start Andy Dalton, they get their first win, and then they play competitively. They actually look like relatively competitive. I don't think that's going to last forever, but at least the last 2 weeks, I think they deserve to get a solid C. They're a passing team for me. I didn't expect them to win a single game all year, and they surprised me. They did beat the Raiders, which give that whatever merit you wish, I suppose. But they had the awareness to bench Bryce Young early and move on with Andy Dalton, and they look competitive for the first last 2 weeks. So I'll give them a C. Maybe a C minus is more appropriate, but give them a C. Average.
Yeah, the fact that they got a win for me is mind blowing. And for this team, Dave Canales, he didn't have the self awareness. He just had the awareness like, hey, man, this is a team that the owner has fired the head coach every single year. And it looks like he's going to be willing to keep firing head coaches until he finds the right one. So he went ahead and saved his job by starting Andy Dalton. He's like, I'm not going to sit here. I know we're going to be the worst team in the division, but I'm not just going to stand by and watch Bryce Young get killed week in and week out. And then the fact that the Panthers got a win this early in the season is kind of mind blowing for me. So I'm actually going to give the Carolina Panthers, for what the expectations are and where they are at this point in the season, an A minus for this team I mean, I didn't expect them to win a game this year. I thought maybe you get a tie, not let alone this early in the season. So I think the fact that they got to win and look competitive versus the Bengals after the Bengals just scored every single time on Monday Night Football, you get an A minus.
I think that's fair. I mean, I'm keeping in the mind like what I saw the first 2 weeks as well, but the last 2 weeks they deserve an A minus, and I think that if they continue with Andy Dalton, they'll at least be competitive. Also, got to give some respect to Chuba Hubbard too. Chuba Hubbard has actually run his ass off the last 2 weeks as well, and Deontay Johnson as well has played really well. So honestly, the Panthers the last week like look like a competent football team, which is something we haven't seen in the Bryce Young era whatsoever. So maybe you're right. Maybe a high letter grade is deserving of these Carolina Kitty Cats. But
Right. The Saints,
now we go.
you're up.
Now we have the Saints. If this was just the letter grades for week one, they would have gotten A plus plus. They probably would have gotten over 100 on a 100-point scale. They were excellent. Destroyed the Panthers. Destroyed the Cowboys. And then they went to Philly and scored 12 points. And then they lose to the Falcons on yet another Kirk Cousins clutch fourth quarter drive to win the game. Young Hoku with an absolute boot to beat the Falcons, or the Falcons to beat them, I mean. So they're 2-2. First 2 weeks, Derek Carr was the MVP. Last 2 weeks, not so much. I feel like the first 2 weeks was seems like it was kind of a fluke. Alvin Kamara still running his ass off, but when your whole scheme is Rashid Shaheed or bust, it's just not a recipe for success. And I think that their schedule gets a lot tougher this upcoming month. Now we're really going to see what they really are. For the Saints, just because what we saw the first 2 weeks and now, I'll give them, I think giving them a B minus is appropriate. I think they're still competitive. I think they'll still be in the mix for the division, but I don't think they'll end up winning the division.
No, I think it'll be a tough road for the division and it'll be a battle. At this point, it's any man's game when it comes to winning the division. However, with how wildly impressive they were in week 1 and 2, they have a tough game, but you bounce back in competitive fashion versus the Atlanta Falcons, and your defense still does look like that solid Saints defense that it has looked like in years past. And now the offense is taking it up another stretch. Alvin Kamara looks like he still has a little bit of pep in his step. We'll see how he progresses throughout the season and if he can stay healthy. But right now, for the New Orleans Saints, I'm going to give them a B. And I think they're passing right now. You had really one really bad game. You had a really competitive loss on kind of a historic field goal. I mean, 58 yards is a really tough field goal to make, but I think you lose to a team in your division, get behind a little bit, set yourself back in the standings, and then you start out so hot and come crashing so hard back down to earth. Gonna give this team a B. Can't really get them in that A range, but I think they're right in the middle, above average. You pass the first quarter.
You pass the first quarter. Then we go to the Falcons. The Falcons so far, week one, they get shut down by the Steelers, just like everybody else so far. Then they beat the Eagles on Monday Night Football thanks to a clutch Monday Night Football Kirk Cousins fourth quarter last minute drive to win the game in historic fashion, something that was not on my 2024 bingo card. And then play competitively against the Chiefs in week three. Arguably should have won that game if it wasn't for a missed pass interference call for Kyle Pitts. And then they beat the Saints on a 58-yard field goal in week four. They're 2-2. Schedule gets a little bit easier down the stretch. Honestly, for the Falcons, for me, it's kind of what I expected them to be, kind of figuring themselves out through the first quarter. I'll give them a B because I think they should have beaten the Chiefs, and they are 2-2. I think they're in a good spot, and their losses haven't been bad either.
I mean, it's not their fault that they didn't beat the Chiefs. I mean, when a guy gets tackled before the ball gets to him and the ref's like, "Oh, what is that? The Chiefs paid me a bunch of money to look the other way." Like, I feel like they were right there in that game. I thought they were the best 1 and 2 team. And for the Atlanta Falcons, this was the team I was kind of I needed to see this how this team actually looked with Kirk Cousins, but damn, Kirk Cousins looks really good in number 18 in week 1. I mean, he's coming off an Achilles injury, did not look that good at all. People are like, "Oh, Kirk Cousins is washed." People freak out way too early in the NFL season. And then you play a really solid game on Monday Night Football, and it looked like that's where he started to turn the clock and start to turn back into a different version of Kirk Cousins, and maybe the best version of Kirk Cousins we've ever seen, where he's leading his team down the field in these clutch drives now. Drake London is turning it up to another notch. Matthew Judon is the final piece for that team now defensively and gives them a pass rush. And then you were able to go ahead and get another win in your division, and you start out 2-2, and the first quarter is how you really set yourself up for the next quarter of football. So with all of that being said, I'm going to give the Falcons a B plus. I can't give you an A because you started out 500, but I feel like you definitely earned a B plus in this situation, especially if you go out there and you get a win versus the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. This team's absolutely going to explode over the next few weeks, and just see the chart. It's going up, up, hitting the resistance level. Resistance level is going to be Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Buccaneers win that game, you get rejected, then they're going to have to test the resistance again to see if they can have a breakout. But I think they're right on the edge of it if they can win another key back to back divisional game. That would be huge for this new Kirk Cousins era, especially with the new head coach who I've been very impressed with, Raheem Morris, so far.
Yeah, Raheem Morris has been excellent for him. But the team that stands in their way potentially for the division is the Buccaneers. What have they done through the first month? Well, they took care of business against week 1 Jaden Daniels. Then they got some revenge against the Lions in Detroit after losing to them in the playoffs last year. Week 3 was a dud of a game. No way to dice it. 26-7 loss to Bo Nix. Not the cutest game. And then they went back and they annihilated the Eagles like they did in the playoffs last year. So 3 teams that they've beaten potentially could be in the playoffs. They had a dud game against the Broncos. What are your early assessments of the Buccaneers so far?
Yeah, early assessments of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers was everyone was worried about the fall off. They're saying that was a fluke from Baker Mayfield last year. Well, Baker Mayfield has solidified himself as a legitimate starter so far in September this year. And so far, they're responding to the doubters. And the thing I've been most impressed with Tampa is Mike Evans and Chris Godwin, sure, they're still doing their things here, and we have Kate on, but the fact that now they have a third receiver who's emerging by the name of Trey Palmer, who is starting to break out a little bit this season, had a touchdown versus the Philadelphia Eagles, and has looked like a nice addition to that offense here. And the run game has actually stood out this season, where it seems like they're running the ball a lot better than they were able to do in the Brady era with overweight sumo Leonard Fournette, whatever he was training for in his eating contest when he showed up in a training camp. And now they have this spark plug that just comes in the name Bucky Irving, the gas station himself, trucking through defenders, giving them some life in that Tampa Bay Buccaneers under Todd Bowles. What will Todd Bowles always have on his football team? Good D. Yeah, he has a good defense all the time in Tampa Bay. So you do have that tough Broncos loss, but those losses typically happen in September. But what you did do was not start like a Bengals team and go 1-4. You went 3-0 in September, beat some quality competition, got revenge versus the Lions. So for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, you get an A minus. I can't give you an A because you had a bad loss. I can't give you an A plus because you haven't looked like world beaters, but you are definitely an A minus quality team. You've looked like the best team in your division so far, and you beat some solid competition so far.
Yeah, I agree. I'm going to steal your grade. I think A minus is appropriate. You beat 3 teams who could be in the playoffs this year, and you beat them competitively as well. The stinker game, it happens. Everyone has it to some extent, so no worries there. I think the Bucks are the best team in that division as well, so I'll steal the A minus grade as well.
All right. That is half of the league now. Now we're going to head west. Going to go to the Should we go back to the AFC or stay in the NFC and get these ugh, some teams in here that are very mixed in that division?
Let's start with the NFC West because it's a weird division to go over so far, and we might as well get it out of the way. So far, so last place right now is the Rams. The Rams are 1-3. They lost to the Lions in overtime in week 1, got embarrassed by the Cardinals in week 2, beat the 49ers after coming back from a two-score deficit to win the game against the 49ers in week 3, and then they lost to Caleb Williams and the Bears in week 4. They're 1-3. There's been a lot of injuries. There's no Puka Nakoa. There's no Cooper Cup. And Matt Stafford is now, I believe, 37, if I'm not mistaken. He will be 37 by the end of the year. So the Rams, I mean, this is their first year without Aaron Donald. They've had injuries, and so far they haven't looked great. They're relying on Jordan Whittington to be their number one receiver and Colby Parkinson to be their tight end. I don't know what happened to Tyler Higbee, but looks like he's not getting the reps he used to. But yeah, I mean, they got killed by the Cardinals, and the Cardinals have not stopped anybody so far this year. We'll go over them next, but the Cardinals game for me is a game I can't look away from. Losing to the Lions in week 1, okay, the Lions are a better team, that's fine. Coming back against the 49ers was pretty impressive. And then losing to the Bears, it is what it is. I'm not going to completely bury them because I think this is a team that is banged up and having a lot of injuries, having a bit of an identity crisis. So I think it's appropriate to give them a C minus in this situation, just based on their situation right now. I don't think a lot of teams would be doing well if they lost their number one and number two receiver.
No, not a lot of teams would be doing well in this situation. However, it is a tough situation that the Rams are in right now. You have only won one game during the season, and then a tough loss again. You mentioned it versus the Lions. But there's only so much Matthew Stafford can do, especially with the injuries piling up. That's going to dock you some points because that's going to set you behind because you need some explosive weapons on your team, or maybe you face a team like the Chicago Bears, which you did last week, who's struggling to find themselves, don't really know who they are, who have a young team and they're kind of getting their footing under them. That was definitely a winnable game if you have Cooper Cup and Puka Nakua, but you don't win that game. You get blown out by the Cardinals, who have not looked very good since then and have kind of fallen off. The one bright spot is Sean McVay is your coach there, but for the Rams, I'll go ahead and give them a C. I think that's a fair grade for them so far. Nothing really exciting about them. You went out there and beat the San Francisco 49ers. Good on you for doing that, but at the end of the day, there's not too much hope to latch onto for the Rams at this point. And it's gonna be that what happened after they won the Super Bowl when they missed the playoffs when Stafford got hurt. And Stafford is old. You mentioned it. And he had a chance to come back versus the Chicago Bears, but at the end of the day, you just don't have that firepower anymore.
No, you don't. Speaking of a team that does not have firepower, let's talk about the Arizona Cardinals. Arizona Cardinals, week 1, they have a huge lead against the Bills that they lose. So they fall 34-28 to the Bills. And then they annihilate the Rams, who are banged up. Then in attendance was Brick Jameson for the Lions game. They had a couple of plays that did not go their way, but overall, you scored 13 points. The offense at certain points just did absolutely nothing. And then this past week, you got obliterated by the Commanders, and your defense looks like Swiss cheese. For a Cardinals team that is in a situation where the Rams are banged up and the 49ers are banged up, really the only other team is the Seahawks. This is your opportunity to show, like, is Jonathan Gannon the guy? You have Maserati Marv now. You have Trey Benson. I'm more disappointed in their situation and not seizing the opportunity than it is for the team themselves. I'm going to give them a D, which is something they don't currently have. Their defense is the fifth worst defense in all of football, and I honestly think eye test wise it might be worse. Terrible defense. It's kind of a joke right now, especially because Jonathan Gannon is a defensive head coach. I'm giving them a D, and hopefully that will give them an actual defense moving forward in the season.
Yeah, I mean, I'm with the Arizona Cardinals. You went over everything I want to hit there, and then I was gonna give them a grade, but I can't find it because, like their quarterback, it's too small. And sometimes it just misplays, and I'm also missing my grade right now for the Arizona Cardinals. Your quarterback, when he can't see over his offensive line, that's a problem. Until Drew Brees, short quarterbacks were not a thing in the NFL. Russell Wilson was able to do it, but Kyler Murray is one of those players who, let's remember, he got his bag. He's already been paid, and Kyler Murray doesn't strike me as this guy who's ultra motivated to be an MVP, one of the best players in the league. He seems like he'll be ultra motivated at when his contract is coming to an end to play really well the last season and a half. So people look at it and then they want to take a chance on him on their roster, and he gets one more really big payday, but overall, he's just someone who seems like he's gotten his money, and I don't think he's the answer there because you look around outside of Marvin Harrison Jr., where's the team? It's not there.
They don't have it. I mean, Trey McBride, he's a good tight end. And then after that, it's like Greg Dortch is your number one, your number two. Michael Wilson, he's okay. James Conner's probably
Wilson.
gone. Probably gone after this year, James Conner. So they just don't have an identity on that team. But that's good for me because the tickets are very cheap. You just have to watch the opposing team have more fans in the stadium.
Yeah. James Conner,
Now
future
we
Patriots running back.
probably, or honestly, the Cowboys. That makes sense for me too.
Yeah,
Um,
that does.
so now we go to the 49ers. What are the 49ers? They are the defending NFC champions. They beat the Jets, or should I say Aaron Rodgers in week one. Surprise, surprise. Then they lose a close game to the Vikings in week two. They blow a huge lead against the Rams in week three. And then they annihilate the Patriots. Man, that must have been difficult for them. Um, so for them, they blew a 21-7 lead in the third quarter to the Rams, and then they've lost a couple of key games. Injuries have piled up for them. George Kittle was banged up. Debo was banged up. Brendan Ayuk hasn't gotten off the bus yet so far this season. So for the 49ers, with all their injuries, I'm going to give them an I for injury because that is what it has been for them. Or maybe I give them an H for Super Bowl hangover, which it looks like is what they have. Or maybe I'll give them an M for Madden curse because Christian McCaffrey. RIP anybody who kept Christian McCaffrey or drafted Christian McCaffrey because it seemed like his legs might just be sawed off by the end of the season with all the reports coming out. So I'll give them an H for hangover.
Yeah, the reports with McCaffrey's injuries are kind of wild. Someone was offering him up in our league, and I was just like, no, I'll give you Trey Benson for him if he comes back, and then I'll have a legitimate running back for a week until he gets hurt again. But we predicted this coming into the season. We're like, Debo Samuel is older, and he's really the guy you need to be off trying to offload, not Brandon Ayuk on this team. Jawan Jennings has been a star, and he's always been a player that I've liked on the San Francisco 49ers. Every time I've watched the 49ers play, I've always, Jawan Jennings has always jumped off the screen for me, and he's always popped on the eye test there. And then George Kittle might, I mean, he still has some games left in the tank, but he might be over the hill, and I don't think he's going to be the same George Kittle over the next few years, and his career starting to come back. You lost Javon Hargrave, who is supposed to be your stud next to Nick Bosa this season. So you already lost your number two pass rusher. So with all of that being said, for the San Francisco 49ers, gonna go ahead and give them a C plus. You're 2-2, blew out the Patriots, blew out the Jets, but you've lost to the competitive teams that you played so far in the Vikings and in the Rams. Brock Purdy's looked like Brock Purdy. Maybe he's better than he has been in years past just because he doesn't have the firepower, but George Mason is a bright spot. Brock Purdy can move a little bit, and your defense hasn't looked completely horrendous yet, and the injuries on defense haven't quite piled up to the extent that it has on the offensive side of the ball. So I'll give him a C plus. I think that's fine.
I think that's fair. Then we have the division leader as of now, which is the Seattle Seahawks. They beat the Broncos in week 1. Then they beat the Patriots in overtime in week 2, killed the Dolphins in week 3, which must have been very difficult for them. And then in week 4, they had arguably the best game of the week, which was them versus the Lions, in which they fell. But Geno Smith played well. Kenneth Walker came back from the injuries. For the Seahawks, I've been really impressed with them. Their defense has played relatively well. Devon Witherspoon is starting to come into his own. I like what I've seen from them. I like what I've seen from Geno. Kenneth Walker has been a dog, and so has DK Metcalf. I'm going to give them an A. I like what I've seen from the Seahawks, and I think that they're going to win the division this year, just given the state of the Rams, Cardinals, and 49ers.
Yeah, and I think they could definitely win the division here. I've actually liked the addition of Mike McDonald a lot. We talked about Gerard Mayo, how the vibe and the energy needs to feel different. We talked about Dan Quinn. We talked about how, you know, Cliff Kingsbury went to Thailand and hung out with some monks and rekindled his spirit there for football and has been an excellent play caller this season. And now with Mike McDonald, that defense, albeit they allowed Jared Goff to go 18 for 18 and scored 42 points, has looked good. Kenneth Walker has been an absolute monster this season, and DK has been a lot more consistent so far than I feel like DK has been in years past, where it seems like they've made, I don't know, it felt like there was a similar situation with George Pickens with DK Metcalf, where it's like DK Metcalf easily has the talent to be the best wide receiver in the league. And I feel like DK Metcalf should be the best wide receiver in the league. And he has been outstanding for them this season. He's been a dominant force, but don't forget about Jackson Smith and Jigba, who they drafted last year, who, like Drake London, it seems like he has been a really solid two for them. He is taking a step forward and he's adding another dynamic element to that offense. And then people were ready to write off Geno Smith last year, but this season, Geno Smith looks like he's better than he has been the last 2 years, and I feel like this is so far still the best Geno Smith that we have seen so far in the NFL at this point. So with the expectations, with what the Seattle Seahawks had stacked against them, with a rookie head coach, I mean, coming into the season, I'm gonna give him an A plus. I think they deserve it. You lost to the Lions, who were in the conference championship last year, and they have two number one running backs in the backfield in David Montgomery and Jameer Gibbs. They have two number one wide receivers on the team in Jamison Williams and Amon-Ra St. Brown, and they have an MVP candidate in Jared Goff, and they have a top five head coach in the league. So, I mean, there's no shame in losing on Monday Night Football to the Lions, who really wanted this game with how the past two games against Seattle has gone. So, I'm going to give them an A plus.
Yeah, I think that's appropriate. Now we go to the AFC West, and this division not quite as cursed as the NFC West, but still has its lumps and bruises. Let's get the Raiders out of the way. A team that is, we talked about at the beginning of the show, is trading Devontae Adams eventually this year. They got the mustache at quarterback. What have they done so far? Well, if I'm being honest with you, it's been kind of a manic ride for the Raiders so far, which I guess, in Vegas, that makes a lot of sense. They lose to the Chargers in week 1, and then week 2, they beat, I don't know, a Super Bowl contender in the Raiders, the Ravens, 26-23. And then they lose to what looked like the worst team in football or maybe ever in the Carolina Panthers. But then they beat the Browns. So they're 2-2, but two losses that did not look great. And then they beat the Ravens and the Rapists. So I
Grape.
I I don't know what to think of the Raiders so far. They've been extremely manic, which I guess is the Vegas air rubbing off on them. I'll ask you first, actually. What are your thoughts on this Raiders team? Because I honestly don't know.
Yeah, my thoughts on this Raiders team, and I talked about this last stream we had yesterday, is I like the grittiness of Antonio Pierce. I like the toughness that he brings to this team. I love the leadership of Max Crosby here, but you tried to give away that game versus the Cleveland Browns. And if the Cleveland Browns had any sort of a pulse, they would have won that game. If they could, I don't know, make an extra point and then After that, you would have lost to the Cleveland Browns, who are kind of a bottom dweller team. Seems like they're finding ways to invent ways to lose game again this season. You lose to the Carolina Panthers and you get blown out by the Chargers, and then you miraculously beat the Ravens somehow. The problem with this team is their defense is good, but it's not an elite shutdown defense yet, and they're not where they want to be. And the problem is, if you want to be that tough, gritty team, you need a tough, gritty run game to back it up, and you can't be at the bottom of the league in rushing. So for me, with this Raiders team, I'm gonna give them a C minus just because you did come back with a 10-point um, deficit against the Baltimore Ravens with Gardner Minshew has done in back-to-back years, but you have not been that impressive. You haven't given your fans anything to be excited about. And the C, I would have given you a D, but since you're in Vegas, I'll give you a C minus just for cocaine.
Yeah. Yeah, that's I'm going to give them an incomplete. I don't know because each week it changes for me. Week 1 I'm like, "Wow, they don't look very good." Then they beat who might be the closest thing to the Chiefs and Texans in the AFC. I'm like, "Oh, so maybe they are good." And then they lose to the Panthers who look like they were going 0 and 17. I understand they started Andy Dalton. And then this week they beat the rapist, but it wasn't necessarily impressive. This is going to be maybe the only grade that I give somebody that is incomplete. I can't even give them a grade. Maybe I'll give them an I for incomplete. Then we go
I for
to,
incomplete.
I'll give them an I. And then we go to the Broncos. This is another team. I don't know what to make of them either. Let's see. They lose to the Seahawks in week 1, and then lose to the Steelers in week 2. But, defensively, they looked pretty good. They beat the Bucks 26-7, and then that god awful Jets game this past week, which is the early recipient of the worst game of the year. 2-2. Bo Nix is doing Bo Nix things. Early sentiments on the Broncos.
I mean, they're not gonna make the playoffs. They're gonna be competitive, and it seems like they're gonna win games, and it seems like their defense is still good, but they're not good enough to dominate people. And I don't want to waste too much energy on the Broncos, so I'm gonna give this team, with where they are at this point, a B minus. I mean, with what we expected from the Broncos, you had them as one of the worst teams in the league. They beat the Bucks, they beat the Jets, and they lost to two very good teams in the Seattle Seahawks and the Pittsburgh Steelers. So I think they've done as much as they possibly could have early on with a 30-year-old quarterback who's turning 40 in a few weeks. Bo Nix, it seems like he's aging in dog years. Every time I turn around, this guy ages another year. So I'm going to give them, yeah, a B minus. I think that's fair. And then I'd give you a C, but B for Bronco. Might as well be generous here for this team because you haven't looked completely abysmal, right?
Just offensively, you have. Yeah, your offenses look terrible. Bo Nix has 1 touchdown in 4 games, but he's a rookie. We'll cut him some slack. Um, yeah, I'll give them. They won twice as many games this year already than what I predicted them to. I'll give them a B minus for that. Then we move on to the Chargers. Beat the Raiders in week 1. Beat the Carolina Panthers in week 2. That must have been hard for them. And then get shut down by the Steelers. Herbert gets banged up. Then they suit up for the Chiefs. They run out to a 10-0 lead, and then the Chiefs come back and win the game 17-10. So they lost to the Steelers and Chiefs, and then they beat the Raiders and Panthers. Your thoughts on the Chargers so far?
I mean, they've looked fine. They're passable. I'll give the Chargers a C plus here. You went out there, you beat the Raiders, handled business within division. You were competitive at least with the Kansas City Chiefs, but had a tough game with the Steelers, where Justin Herbert got knocked out. But you haven't been that bad, and you've started to look a little bit better, at least running the football. This team at least has an identity under Jim Harbaugh. I can't really get into the B range because I haven't been impressed by the Chargers. I just haven't been disappointed with them so far. So for a September 4-game stretch, I think a C plus is just fine for this Chargers team.
I'll give them a B minus because their additions in the offseason, they got Gus Edwards and J.K. Dobbins. They've been pretty good for them. Their rookie Lad McConkey's played really well for them. It feels like they are a little bit more energized than they were the last few years with Brandon Staley, and it feels like they're going in the right direction. So I'll give them a B minus. But like you said, I don't think they're going to set the world on fire. I think they're bound for an 8-9, 9-8 record. But yeah, they haven't overly wowed me, but I think at least there's a some sort of pulse in the locker room these days. So I'll give them credit there. And then lastly, we have the Kansas City Chiefs, who everyone is calling the end of for because week one they beat the Ravens. Week two, they narrowly escape the Bengals 26-25 on a controversial PI call. And then against the Falcons, another controversial call against them. And then they beat the Chargers 17-10. Rashid Rice goes down, not even goes down, gets absolutely murdered by none other than Patrick Mahomes. But they are 4-0. They're one of only two teams that are 4-0. Early sentiment on the two-time defending champion Chiefs.
Yeah, this is exactly what I expect from a two-time defending champion Kansas City Chiefs. Back-to-back years, Patrick Mahomes has won 3 Super Bowls, and guess what? You've won every single game so far. Your defense has been the highlight here. You did lose Rasheed Rice. That is a tough blow for the team. Have they looked like a A team so far? Not really, but I will give them a A minus just because you have won every single game so far. You're one of two undefeated teams, and you have beaten a couple good teams in the Baltimore Ravens. In week one, you're able to come away with the victory there, and you have not lost a game so far. I know it hasn't been the most impressive football, but it has been winning football, and they understand that they can coast. They're getting ready for the playoffs, and then Patrick Mahomes will ramp it up when it matters. But right now, they're just kind of bored, and they've been able to get wins, which is all that matters.
Yeah, I can't give them an A because of how they've played so far. Travis Kelsey looks like this will probably be his last year. Just doesn't seem like he's super invested at this point. My concern with the Chiefs right now is the loss of Pacheco and Rashid Rice, but they always seem to figure it out. So I'll give them a B plus. Patrick Mahomes has been turning the ball over. But at the end of the day, they are 4-0. Whether it be because of the refs or not, I think that they are still the best team in the AFC, and there's not anybody that's really going to contend with them quite yet. So B plus is appropriate for them, I think.
All right.
And then we either stay in the AFC and end the AFC North, or we go to the NFC North. I kind of want to talk about the NFC North last. So let's
Yeah,
talk
let's
about,
save it.
let's do the AFC North. Do you want to go we'll go worst to first again. Right now, technically, the worst team is the Cincinnati Bengals, who started off 0-3 for what feels like the 18th year in a row. And then they beat the Panthers in week four, but lost to the Patriots, lost to the Chiefs on a controversial call, and then did not even have the Commanders punt at all in week three, which was one of the best games of the week. And then they beat the Panthers. The 1-3 Bengals. Thoughts on them?
Yeah, gonna give him an S for stop sucking in September. There's not really much else we can say. This is the same Bengals team we've seen year in and year out. It's been, I mean, tough to watch here. And now your defense is falling apart here until I see their defense actually step up and play competitive football again. It's like, okay, you went out there and you got a win versus the Carolina Panthers. Do you want an award for that? Do you want a trophy? No, this is still the National Football League. You still need to at least win games. The Kansas City Chiefs have started out slow, but they're still 4-0. The Ravens started out slow. They're still 2-2 here. There is no reason for you to keep starting out 1-3 every single year, even with Joe Burrow coming off an injury. So you get a S for stop sucking in September. I'm tired of seeing this year in and year out. Usually the teams that start the slow are the teams that have actually accomplished something. And so far the Bengals think just getting to the Super Bowl, not actually winning it, is a huge accomplishment.
Yeah, I'm going to give them a D plus. Their defense has been bad so far. Um, at least their offense has performed effectively to some extent. Joe Burrow has played well overall. Zach Moss looks like he's been a nice addition, along with Chase Brown. Um, but yeah, stop starting. Why does like it's not like you have any new personnel outside of Zach Moss and Mike Gesicki. Like that shouldn't be the reason why your team continues to suck each and every year. In September, you get a D plus. Cut the shit.
Yeah, Zach Moss has been the bright spot too, which is like, a new
Yeah,
guy on campus.
yeah. Then we go to the Cleveland Browns, who, if you guys have been watching this last 3 weeks, they have been pinned to the worst top fives for a few reasons. Not just because they traded for a serial rapist, but also because they just actually suck. They get annihilated by, of all teams, the Cowboys, who we didn't give a great grade to. And then they beat the Jaguars, who we didn't give a great grade to. And then they lose to the Giants, who we didn't give a great grade to, and then they lose to the Raiders, who again we didn't give a great rating for. So they're 1-3. Honestly, probably could have been 0-4. Deshaun Watson hasn't looked all that great. Jerome Ford hasn't been the Jerome Ford of last year, and their receiver core. What an enigma that's been. Amari Cooper supposed to be this guy that's a killer. Jerry Judy supposed to be the killer that's promised. This team is pathetic. I'm going to give them a P because, again, you traded for a rapist, and your team sucks. And honestly, your franchise deserves to be poverty. So P for poverty, P for pathetic, and P for P Diddy, which is Deshaun Watson.
Yeah, he took the words right out of my mouth. I was gonna give him a D for Diddy, but yeah, I like P for P Diddy, and I'm gonna go with that grade as well here because you were energized with Joe Flacco here. Deshaun Watson clearly does not care. He's just showing up to work to collect a paycheck. And can you really blame him? No. The comical thing about Deshaun Watson, this doesn't relate to football, as he like only I don't know if you follow him on Instagram, but he only has like his comments turned on to a certain group of people. So his comments aren't public. It's only like people who know him. So it'll be like he'll make a post and then it'll just be a bunch of fangirls in his comments like, "Oh my god, Deshaun Watson, keep rocking it. Keep doing you. Like keep fighting the haters, man. Like you got this." Just like a bunch of people he paid to comment there. But yeah, he does
That's
not
pathetic.
allow the public to comment on his Instagram post, and I wonder why that is.
I think
What do
there's
you,
40
why do
people.
we
I
think
think
that
there's
is?
40 reasons why, maybe more.
Wow,
With that,
Hannah Baker had a lot less reasons too. Jesus.
yeah.
It's me
Now we go.
again.
Now we go to the Ravens. They started off 0-2. They lost to the Chiefs in week one. All right, whatever. It is what it is. Week two, they lose to the Raiders, which was an enigma, but it happens. And then they beat up on the Cowboys. The score is deceitful. And then they just obliterate the Bills, who everyone was anointing as Super Bowl contenders after the first 3 weeks. So 2-2. Derrick Henry rushed for 200 yards this past week, and they're in conversations potentially for Devontae Adams. My early thought on the Ravens: they are 2-2. They lost to the Chiefs, so I feel like that one loss doesn't really count. Losing to the Raiders isn't great, but bouncing back 2-2, I'm going to give them a B. I like what I've seen from Derrick Henry. I mean, Derrick Henry, talk about a guy who just never ages. He's going to be, what, 31 this year? And he leads the league in rushing, leads the league in touchdowns, just had an 87-yard run, stiff armed the poor Bills defender. Like, Derrick Henry's been a home run connection. They might also go out and get a receiver. So I'll give him a B. I like what I've seen.
Yeah, yeah, B for beast mode for Derrick Henry, just beating people in the submission, whether it's the defenders or whether it's his critics. Who every year the hot take has been this will be the year Derrick Henry falls off, and people just kind of wrote off the Derrick Henry pickup for the Ravens like it was a nothing burger. Like they're like, yeah, it'll help them, but it's not going to make a huge difference. And we are seeing that is not the case right now because the Ravens could legitimately win games without throwing the ball. And now, when you have to worry about Lamar Jackson and Derrick Henry, that is a scary dynamic duo in the backfield. And I'm gonna go ahead and give the Ravens a B plus here because they ended the quarter strong and they are starting to look like that dynamic team that finished as a top four team last year. And John Harbaugh has been a good head coach for them, at least in the regular season so far. And he is a Super Bowl winning head coach, getting that win over his brother here. So I will go ahead and then put the Ravens at a B plus. Hopefully you can get up there and get an A, but you did put yourself in a nice position to take control of the division. If the Steelers start to stumble, maybe it was a fluke in September. We'll see if the Steelers are for real. But right now, I think the Ravens have another really solid chance of just taking the reins in that division, especially if the Bengals defense is still this bad. And then just all around the Steelers, it's tough when you don't have a top 10 quarterback in the league to go up against Derrick Henry and Lamar Jackson.
Yeah. Which leads us to our last team in the AFC North, or early in the AFC in general, is the Pittsburgh Steelers. They beat down on the Atlanta Falcons in week one. They beat down on Bo Nix in week two. They beat down on the Chargers in week three. And then they did fall to the Colts in week four with Joe Flacco. They did probably prepare for Anthony Richardson. He went down, but not a terrible loss. I really like what I've seen from the Steelers to this point. Their running game has been effective. Justin Fields, a guy who I've had my questions with in the past, he's been effective for him. Looks like he can actually read the field finally. Only took him 5 years. And then their defense has been excellent so far. I mean, the first three games, they held them to a total of 26 points across three games. That's absolutely absurd. And I think their defense is going to continue to be great. I'm going to give them an A plus. I think they've been excellent so far. Their offense can finally move the ball, and I think they're going to be a real tough out for any team moving forward. So, really like what I've seen. I hope they continue the momentum in October.
An A plus is wild for
I
the
know, man.
Steelers. That is
Yeah.
absolutely crazy with where you had them coming into the season. You're like Russell Wilson, Justin Fields, doesn't matter coming into the season. And now they come out here, hold their opponents to 23 points. I can't give them an A plus. Just because of that Colts loss. But I have liked what I've seen from the Pittsburgh Steelers. I like that they're going at it and getting the ball to George Pickens. Najee Harris has shown some signs of life, and at least Arthur Smith is better than Matt Canada here. And then Mike Tomlin, when he was talking about the development of Justin Fields, definitely fired some indirect but not so subtle shots at you know the Bears head coach for not coaching Justin Fields to his strengths here. And Mike Tomlin was talking about that in the press conference. And he's like, you know what? Justin Fields, he ain't so bad. I think I can make this Ohio fuck, as Pat McAfee would say, a really solid starter in this league. So I'm going to go ahead and give the Steelers team an A minus because, one side of the ball was really dominant in the first few weeks, but are we just going to brush under the rug that it took the offense, I don't know, 4 weeks to come alive?
No, no, their offense is coming together. That's all that matters.
Yeah, it's coming together, but that's uh, yeah, it is. You're right. It's coming together. Just like
Coming
Gary
together
Clark Jr.
slowly.
said, "Come together," or the Beatles.
Exactly.
And
The
did
Beatles
he
said it.
remake that song?
Yeah, he covered it.
Okay. Okay. Well, it's better than the
Uh,
original.
and then we go to the last division in the NFL that we have to give our quarterly grades for. We will start with the Chicago Bears, a team that I was very high on entering into the season, still relatively high on. Um, week one, they beat the Titans, and then Texans take care of business against them. They lose to them. They lose to the Colts. Offense doesn't look very great. DeAndre Swift was a complete shell of his former self. And then they beat the Rams in week four. Have they turned the page? We don't know yet. Caleb Williams has been very inconsistent. He's been not overly accurate. The offensive line has been atrocious. D Swift at one point was literally the worst running back in football, statistically. But that being said, their defense has played well. I think that bound to struggle at early parts of the season. I'll give them a C. I think that they're capable of better, but I still need to see them play better. I need Caleb Williams to play more effectively as the number one overall pick. When Jaden Daniels is outperforming you and he was taken right after you, that's not always a good sign historically, as we've gone over before. So I'll give them a C. I think they're capable of better, but what I've seen so far has not been ideal.
The sea is crazy. Wow. Man of love turned into a man with no heart. This guy just gave the Steelers an A plus who didn't have an offense in the first 3 weeks of the season. And then the Bears struggle in 2 games with their rookie quarterback. He's like, you know what? How about a C here? Well, I guess I'm
I
the
think it's
man of
fair.
love here because I actually think the Bears, their offense hasn't looked ideal here, but their defense still has looked like the defense that closed out last season. And their offense is coming together. The weakness is definitely that offensive line, but I feel like 2-2 is solid, especially with setting yourself up for a bunch of cupcakes. This is one of the hardest stretches throughout their schedule. So I'm gonna give them a B minus because it was bearable at least throughout the first few weeks of the year. Caleb Williams, I mean, he's been under fire week in and week out. He's played up against some tough defenses, but he was able to overcome Tennessee. They were able to overcome the Rams and drop 24 points, and D Swift came alive. Cole Komet, I mean, going for over 100 yards and a touchdown in that game versus the Indianapolis Colts with Roma Dunze, and then DJ Moore is due for a breakout game. And when they get Keenan Allen back, I feel like that's been the theme throughout Keenan Allen's whole career is when they get Keenan Allen back. I think the Bears are going to be solid. Caleb Williams is going to keep getting better. And the fact that it was bearable through the first 4 weeks, it's like it doesn't matter how Caleb Williams looks right now. It matters how Caleb Williams looks in November and December. So the fact that you got through the stretch 2-2, B minus, you were bearable. You got through it.
All right. Then we
A
go
C.
to
Crazy.
I don't think a C is that crazy. They have the worst running in football. Their offensive line's been ass. And Caleb Williams was another guy who was anointed, like Trevor Lawrence, to be the prince that's promised. And so far through the first 4 games, if we're judging the first 4 games, he's been below average. So I'm giving him a C. I'm a hard grader right now.
It's late.
I don't give good grades to anybody. Um okay. Then we go to the Packers, right? The Packers week 1 they're in South America. Jordan Love goes down. They lose to the Eagles on a Friday game. Then they beat the Colts with Malik Willis, and then follow it up in week 3, getting a revenge game for Malik Willis. Malik Willis looks the best he's ever looked in week 3. And then in week 4, Jordan Love comes back from injury, and they do fall to the Vikings, but have a huge fourth quarter comeback and almost won the game for the Packers. Here in my analysis of the Packers, I think with the Jordan Love injury, with the way you played with Malik Willis, with how we've seen successful iterations with Jaden Reed, Dontavian Wicks, Romeo, art thou Romeo Dobbs, and all these other players, Tucker Kraft coming in, their defense playing pretty well. This Packers team has really impressed me, especially with the loss of Jordan Love for 2 weeks and how well Malik Willis played. I'll give them an A plus. I'm really like what I've seen from them so far.
An A plus, yeah. Bears, I mean, you were 2-2, same record as the Green Bay Packers, playing up against some tough teams in the Indianapolis Colts and the Houston Texans and the Rams. But, I'm going to go out there and give the Packers, who have the same record as you, an A plus. I mean, I don't necessarily disagree with you, but I think with the Packers, you win a tough game versus the Indianapolis Colts. You lose a tough one versus the Eagles, and you come alive versus the Vikings at the end of it. And I feel like this is an A plus caliber team, but you still are 2-2, and I think you're in the A category. But I'm gonna give you an A minus. I think you've done enough. You held the ship with Malik Willis. You have all of this talent, but we still need to see it all come together. We still need to see you go out there and win a game in division. So I'm gonna go ahead, give them an A minus because the teams you did beat were the Indianapolis Colts with Anthony Richardson in week 2, who had probably his worst game as a pro, and then you also beat the Titans.
Yeah, I like what I've seen from the Packers. I think they're going to continue to be better, especially if Jordan Love can stay healthy through it all. I think the fact that they were playing well with Malik Willis, who looked like he couldn't even play football at any level, never mind the NFL, making him as good as he has, they got to give him some flowers there. Now we go to the Lions, who obviously big Lions supporters on this show. Week 1, they win in overtime against the Rams. Obviously, a very emotional game for them, as always. They lose to Tampa in week 2, but it's a close, gritty game. They beat up on the Cardinals in week 3. And then in week 4, they have arguably the best game of the season so far. Jameson Williams got loose. Amon Ra throwing passing touchdowns. Jameer Gibbs and David Montgomery getting in on the fun. Lions to this point. This is a team that a lot of people were saying was not going to continue the success from last year when they were 13-4. I like what I've seen. They've continued the momentum. I'll give them an A minus. I think they're exactly where they should be, and I think they're going to continue to get better, including Jameson Williams, Sam Laporta. They'll start to implement a little bit more. I think A minus is appropriate for the Lions. What do
Yeah,
you see?
the Packers get an A+, but you went 3-1. Jared Goff has a perfect game. We dropped 42 points. We beat the Seattle Seahawks for the first time in this era with Dan Campbell. But yeah, the Packers, you get an A+. The Lions, you give an A-. The Lions, you did lose. To the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, but that was a tough playoff rematch. But you overcame the Rams again, which was an incredibly difficult task, especially to beat a team, I believe, 3 times in the past 2 years. That's nothing short of a miracle there. And then also going up against the Arizona Cardinals, you have the hook and lateral play. And then also, this has been the most entertaining team to watch at least last week, dropping 42 points with weapons everywhere, all over the field. I mean, I have to give this team an A. Absolutely. I mean, you can't get an A+ quite yet. I know some teams that are 500 are getting A+ out here today, but I have to give the Lions an A for how they started the year. Absolutely spectacular for a team that people were saying was going to have a hangover. People are like, wow, this Lions team, I think they're going to fall off. It's like, wow, the Lions are going to fall off. I was like, no, the Lions are not going to fall off. They still have 2 number 1 running backs with Jameer Gibbs and David Montgomery alternating touchdowns. You still have Laporta, who people are like, oh, he's banged up. He's still getting better. And then someone was saying that they didn't fully believe in Jameson Williams. They hadn't seen enough yet coming into the season after he had an extremely dominant performance in back-to-back playoff games. I don't know. This Lions team looks better this year than they were last year, especially with Carlton Davis. I like the addition where he's someone in the secondary getting in the ref's face. And then they had that heated exchange in the Seattle Seahawks game where he's like, what are you doing? And it seems like this defense is taking it to another level this year. The offense is taking it to another level this year, and they may just have the best offensive player in the league this year.
Yeah, and I think one thing I liked what I've seen with the Lions as well is Jameson Williams has been banged up. He's been suspended. And now we're finally see him and what he's able to bring to that offense, which is not only a deep threat, but also someone who's just got absolute wheels. I like what I've seen from him this year. Now we go on to the last team, maybe the biggest surprise in all the NFL, which is the Minnesota Vikings. Sam Darnold, guy who journeyman at this point, played for the Panthers and Jets and hasn't played great football so far in his career. Well, the Vikings are 4-0. They beat up on the Giants in week 1, beat up on the Niners in week 2, destroyed the Texans in week 3, and the Packers in week 4. Sam Darnold leads the league in touchdowns, hasn't thrown a bunch of interceptions either. Justin Jefferson doing Justin Jefferson things, and Aaron Jones is running mean. Not only that, their defense, Brian Flores, his scheme has been effective. Vikings, they're 4-0, biggest surprise of the league. I'm going to give them an A.
An A? That's it?
No, I'll give them
Really?
an A. I'll give him an A plus.
No, 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 no. You can't take back your grade. This isn't where the teacher you can come back to the office and they get to suck you off to get a better grade. No. That's not how this
I think
works. But
A
if
is
you want to
appropriate.
take it back and give them an A plus, that's fine. But I thought, the Vikings, I didn't quite know what to expect, but what I did know coming into the year, they were going to be better than most people are going to give them credit for because I thought what their number one weakness was coming into the season was the running position last year, and they addressed it with Aaron Jones. And I thought the defense was going to be better under Brian Flores. And so far, it's exceeded my expectations at every single level. I did see some of the cracks start to fall in that Packers game with Sam Darnold. But if the Super Bowl was played in September, the Vikings and the Bills would be right there competing for it. So the Minnesota Vikings, I'm going to give them an A plus coming into it. You have Kevin O'Connell, who has been a magnificent coach. This was a team that I had as a dark horse. I just didn't quite know how good they were going to be or if they could win the division. But I did say coming into the year, I think this division would be like the AFC North last year, where we saw the first time in NFL history where every single team had a winning record in the division. And I think when something happens in history once, it's a lot easier for it to happen again. And I think that is going to happen in this division again this year.
We love it. Hell yeah. We graded every team. And I think my grades were pretty good, but maybe the comment section will disagree with my A plus grades, but I like what I like what I did there. Now, we've been recording now for about 2 hours. If we wanted to, we could preview the games tomorrow. I know that some people have bedtimes that they must attend to, or we can grind through and get through the games of the week for week 5 of the NFL.
Yeah, thankfully, people over 60 have a bedtime. So unless you have one, I'm good to keep going.
All right. Well, let's start week 5 of the NFL, officially entering the second quarter of the NFL season. Let's start with tomorrow's game, Thursday Night Football, division rivalry at Mercedes Bank Stadium. The Falcons are hoisting the Tampa Bay Buccaneers for
Hoisting.
NFC South supremacy.
Yeah, what's the spread on this one?
Right now, the Atlanta Falcons are favorited at 1.5. It's a home game, so I think they're slightly favoring the Bucks here.
Yeah, and right now my gut instinct is saying Tampa Bay Buccaneers, especially since Kirk Cousins is still kind of finding his footing, and we have seen a little bit of cracks with the Atlanta Falcons. And I think the Falcons are getting better each week, but I don't think they're there quite yet. And I don't think they have the same team chemistry as the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. I do think this will be a close game. I think it'll come down to the wire again. However, I think the Tampa Bay Buccaneers see this as a challenge where they can take an early stranglehold on that division and give themselves a little bit of a cushion when they start to play some of these other opponents outside of the NFC South. So right now, give me the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. I'll take them against the spread here. I think it'll be a field goal game. I think 1.5 points. Like it's always hard to get a 1 point game there. So I'll take the Tampa Bay Buccaneers straight up.
Yeah, I think the Bucks are the better team, and I think because of the continuity that they already have from last year, I just think that you're catching the Bucks at the right time. So I'll take the Bucks to win this game as well. I like what I've seen from Bucky Irving, Mr. Gas Station himself. So I think this will also come down to a field goal game. I'm thinking like 24-21. But I think the Falcons start to piece things together a little bit more. Give me the Bucks in this game.
All right. And we have the first bye weeks too this week for
We
some
do. We
unlucky
do have,
teams.
yeah, the Lions, they're taking care of the bye for sure. Um, the Titans, they'll take care of the bye, hopefully,
Maybe.
maybe. Or
I think they might
maybe
tie. I think they might tie.
maybe Will Levis will turn it over. Who knows? Eagles, they just get to enjoy their shitty cheesesteaks, I guess. And then the Chargers, they get to hang out with all of their fan in their bye week. So good for them.
Yeah, they get
Get
to
some
hang out
nice
with you.
rest.
Good for them.
I'm not a Chargers fan, but they can enjoy their presence with Devin Gennard and Zach Vujanov. All right. Let's go over across the pond for our first international game, which will be played my
Second.
time, 6:30 in the morning on Sunday. Set my alarm
What?
early, I suppose. Yeah,
Well, you're heading
what
back. You're flying home on Sunday. What time's your flight?
6 p.m. So I'll wake up at 9:30 and the game will be on, which is cool, I guess. But West Coast 6:30. That's fucking terrible, to be honest. But we love football. We do it for football. Right now, it's Vikings and Jets. Vikings are hoisting, I suppose. They are favorited at 2.5 against Aaron Rodgers and the New York Jets. Early sentiments on this game so far. Vikings are 4-0. You said you saw some cracks in the armor. Do you think the Vikings move to 5-0, or does reality set in and they come down to earth a little bit?
Yeah, I think this is a game where reality sets in for the Vikings, and I think the Jets got embarrassed pretty badly, and Aaron Rodgers, off of a loss like that, I think will bounce back here. And I think that the Vikings are due for a loss at this point. It's been a good story. They started 4-0, but I think the Jets defense is going to be good enough to give the Vikings and Sam Darnold some problems here. We'll have that epic matchup of Sauce Gardner versus Justin Jefferson here. And I think the New York Jets may have Devontae Adams in the works at this point, so that could be a good motivator. But I think the Jets, off of a bad loss like that, are going to be due to come back and win a game here. So I will take the Jets in international waters across the pond to win this game here. I think it'll be good.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. I think also like having Aaron Rodgers, who's a little bit more seasoned vet, going across the pond, like between the jet lag and traveling and everything else. I feel like the Jets team are a little bit older, so I feel like the players like the Mike Williams and Adam Lazards of the world will be more prepared for it. I'll take the Jets to win this game as well. I think the Vikings slowly start to come down to earth, and the Jets prevail. Then we have the Bears hoisting the Carolina Panthers. Potential revenge game for Andy Dalton? Question mark. Who knows? Bears are favorited at -4, and they are at Soldier Field for the first of the 1 o'clock slate.
Yeah, they are at Soldier Field, and the Bears' schedule starts to get a little bit easier, and it's a tough road trip for the Cincinnati Bengals. You got your energy infusion, but Andy Dalton has never lost in his career to the Oakland, now Vegas Raiders. It's getting late at night here, but I do think that the Chicago Bears are starting to find themselves, at least on the offensive line side, where D Swift was able to check into the game. And this game is not going to be the Rome Odunze game. It's not going to be the Cole Kmet game, even though every game is the Cole Kmet game for the Chicago Bears. I think this is going to be the DJ Moore game where he fucking laughs in the Panthers' face and gets maybe 200 yards from Caleb Williams. I mean, this is going to be the game where the Bears take that giant ass knife out, shove it right in the Carolina Panthers' back, and say, "Remember when you made the dumbest trade in NFL history? Well, let's see that unfold right before your very eyes here in Chicago." And we've seen players like Andy Dalton come in and start for these teams, look really good in week one, look pretty decent in week two, and then just fall off a cliff as the season keeps going on. And I think that the Panthers are going to come back to down to earth.
Yeah, I agree. I think the Bears started to piece it together last week. Andy Dalton, he's done it pretty much with every team that he's played for. So I agree. I think Chicago comes back. They bounce back. They win. Maybe this will be the first game that we see Caleb Williams really start to ball out. And I think maybe that's the case. I'll take the Bears to win as well. And I take them covering the points as well. And the Bears move to 3-2. Then we have game of the week potential here. We have Baltimore taking on the Bengals in a divisional matchup. Um, Bengals are 1-3. Ravens are 2-2. Right now, the Ravens are favorited at 2.5 away in Cincinnati.
Yeah, that's fair. Um, you're giving them the favorite there. That's basically saying that they're a 5 point favorite because you automatically get 3 points for being at home. But I need to see the Bengals actually defense come out and do it. And if the same Bengals defense that's been playing over the past few weeks comes out and shows up versus this Ravens team. I just think this Ravens team is better than the Bengals at this point. Give me Derrick Henry and Lamar Jackson, the maybe the most dynamic running duo in NFL history. When people were talking about, oh my God, Kyrie Irving and Luka Doncic are the most skilled backcourt or the best shooting duo in the league is Steph Curry and Klay Thompson. Well, the best running duo is probably Lamar Jackson and Derrick Henry. They're setting records at this point, and Joe Burrow has struggled versus the Ravens outside of that 1 year where the Ravens' entire secondary was hurt, and he had the two biggest games of his career. They struggled versus them last year, and I think that trend will also continue this year, and the Ravens get another win. Get a little bit closer to inching to the top of the AFC North here. So I'll take the Ravens.
I'm going to take the Bengals here. I think the Bengals are more desperate for the win here. I mean, they're 1-3. If they fall to 1-4, they're probably not making the playoffs at this point. And Joe Burrow, he typically shines out in these kind of games, right? He shines out against Josh Allen, shines out against Patrick Mahomes. I feel like these are games that he has circled on his calendar. So I'll take the Bengals to win this game. I have a feeling this will be high scoring because Bengals defense has not been very good so far, but I do think that they prevail and they do win this game. I'll take like a 31-28 kind of game and it being one of the best games of the week. But I will take the Bengals to win.
Yeah, and I think it could be one of the best games. And I love me some Joey B. Whether it's the president I share a birthday with, or the bigger, stronger Macaulay Culkin. And I'm not doubting Joe Burrow in this game. I'm doubting the entire Bengals defense in this game. So that's why I'll go with the Ravens. But yeah, it should be a good game. Hopefully.
I hope so. And then another game of the week contender here. We have the Miami Dolphins taking on the New England Patriots in Foxborough. Tickets as low as $90 is a crime. New England, what are
In
you doing?
Foxborough?
This should be free. The fact that we can see that's a whole nother argument that we can go into, but that's $90 for this game is pathetic. The over under is 36 and a half. I don't usually care about over unders, but I feel like their over under here should be 20 because ultimately it's going to be decided on who kicks the most field goals in this game. Nobody's scoring touchdowns. There might not even be points on the board. This could be a 6-3 game or a 3-3 game. This game is going to be absolutely abysmal. Two terrible teams who cannot score whatsoever. This
Yeah.
is actually, you usually are the guy that goes for the tie. I'm going to be the guy who goes for the tie this time. This is going to be a tie 3-3.
No, it's not going to be 3-3. It's going to be 2-2.
Oh, God.
This is going to be the first 2-2 tie in NFL history. Because do you remember when, for the longest time, Jacoby Brissett had the dumbest play in NFL history when he threw a check down in the end zone? God,
Yep.
that's the same guy versus the Miami Dolphins. And the thing is, the Dolphins are bad, yes. The Patriots are bad, yes. But the Dolphins have historically owned the Patriots over the past few years. Even in the Brady era, they picked up wins here. So, yeah, if you're smashing that tie button, I will stand in solidarity with you and smash that tie button. You're going 3-3. I will go 5-5.
5-5. That's insane. We're in for a pretty terrible game nonetheless.
Do you think
Good
this will
God.
be worse than Jets and Broncos?
Yeah, I think it'll be worse because at least Jets with Broncos, it's like, oh, Aaron Rodgers, that's cool. Oh, what is Bo? No, neither of these teams. Jacoby Brissett versus Tyler Huntley. Woof, dude. Ugh. The question is whether or not the Dolphins will finally get a lead at any point in a game this season, or if we'll have to wait till week 6 for it. Oh
Yeah,
man, two teams that'll probably be on the worst top 5 next week.
yeah.
Speaking of worst top 5 teams, we have the Cleveland Rapists taking on the Washington Commanders. Commanders are at home and they are favorited by 3. Commanders so far have looked way better than the Browns. Jaden Daniels looks like he is the next guy. No reason to not pick the Commanders in this game. Am I wrong?
Yeah, if you're a betting man, you are correct. The correct pick is the Washington Commanders. And I think I have a feeling this game isn't just going to be the Commanders dominating. Like the Cleveland Browns defense is good in certain stretches, and I think that they will give the Commanders a little bit of a run for their money here. But I can see this game being like a 23-17 type of game here. So I will go with the Commanders as well to cover the spread. But I don't think that the Commanders are just going to come out and dominate Cleveland in this game. And I have a feeling, just call it an intuition, we will see Jameis Winston come into the game and give
I
the
hope so.
Cleveland Browns a surge of life and potentially unpin them on the top 5 worst team for the Cleveland Grapists.
I can promise you that if Jameis Winston steps onto the field and plays whatsoever, they will not be on the worst top 5. They will be forgiven for that honor that they gave us. Now we have the Colts and the Jaguars. Jaguars, by the way, are the only team that has not won a football game this year. But yet, for some reason, they are favorited at -3 at home against the Colts. The Colts will either be Anthony Richardson or Joe Flacco at the helm, taking on the little kitty cats of Jacksonville, the Shad Khan looking ass Mario villain owner that they have.
Wario.
Jaguars favorited when they're 0 4. What
Wait,
are they
what?
doing? Yeah, the Jags are favorited at -3 at home. What are you doing, dude? I don't care. They're 0 4. Trevor Lawrence sucks. Doug
The
Peterson's overrated. Come on now.
the Colts just beat the Steelers. And
That's
do we not know, like, you're a history buff. Take the audience through what the Colts have done to the Jacksonville Jaguars over the past few years.
I'll get the official stats. Well, we know that the Colts annihilate the Jags in Jacksonville. I'll get the exact records up, but come on. Like, what are we doing here? Why is this even what are we doing? Let me look at their
Yeah.
record.
Well, wasn't like the Carson like Wentz game where the Colts missed the playoffs, like the Urban Meyer year, the Jaguars beat them and they were pretty bad that year.
Yeah,
But
let me
like with
look.
this Colts team, I just don't see them losing to the Jacksonville Jaguars in Jacksonville. So I will take the Colts. They're a much better team, especially defensively. I feel like that unit will be able to win them this game alone. And if Joe Flacco is playing in this game, like, it's no question that the Colts win. I feel like that's insane, but it's basically a pick 'em game because you get 3 points for being at home. So Vegas, like, they should know what to make of this game, but they're not comfortable enough to have the Colts as a favorite on the road, which is just mind blowing when they just beat the Steelers, which were a quality football team, and held their opponents to 23 points. Like Jonathan Taylor might run for 200 yards.
Yeah, unless if Trayvon Walker has anything to say about it. Daddy long arms.
Walker, I hardly walk.
Yeah, Colts win easily. Now we have another game of the week contender. This is a 1 o'clock slate game. We have the Texans hoisting the beloved Buffalo Bills. Bills are favorited. Kind of a split game. Bills are favorited at 1 point, so kind of a pick 'em game. In Houston, Buffalo coming off of an embarrassing loss. Texans coming off of a less than impressive win. Early sentiments: Josh Allen versus C.J. Stroud.
Yeah, Josh Allen versus CJ Stroud. Another tough game for the Buffalo Bills. Just had the Baltimore Ravens on Sunday Night Football, and this is a good test for the Houston Texans. And right now, I'm going with the Houston Texans. This was a team that we had as favorites to go to the Super Bowl in the AFC as that kind of 1B team that the Kansas City Chiefs 1A to everyone else here in that contender tier with them, the Baltimore Ravens, and the Cincinnati Bengals. So I will go with the Houston Texans in this game. I think this will be a low scoring war. I don't think it's going to be a high flying game where we see points, but I feel like the difference in this game is going to be CJ Stroud has that go to guy that he'll be able to connect with in a close game when they need a touchdown in Nico Collins. I just don't know who that guy is yet for the Buffalo Bills. And the Bills started out hot. They shellacked a bunch of really bad teams, which is kind of what their trend has been over the past few years. So I need to see them step up and come out and beat another tough AFC opponent and they have not done that yet. And they proved that they can dominate some bad teams. But 10 points versus the Baltimore Ravens is just leaving a sour taste in my mouth. So I am back to my Bills. Some call it haters' ways, but I'm back to my Bills truth ways.
Yeah, I think that the thing for me that gives me the Texans the edge is Stephon Diggs is an angry man. He was ready to leave Buffalo, and I feel like we're going to see a Stephon Diggs revenge game for the Texans. I think the Texans are also just a better team defensively, better offensively. I'll take the Texans as well. I do think it's going to be a closer game. I do think the Bills are going to bounce back and play better than they did against the Ravens, which I don't know if they could play any worse. But give me the Texans in this game. I think they prevail. I think it'll come down to like a field goal, most likely.
Yeah, I think it'll be like 23-20 though.
Yeah. And then we go to the 4 o'clock slates. We have Vegas taking on the Denver Broncos, which has the current lowest over under of the week, lower than the Patriots and Dolphins.
Really?
Yep.
Wow. Um, this game, honestly, give me the Broncos in this one. The Broncos, I feel like, have showed me more than the Las Vegas Raiders have. Um, and the Broncos at least have a run game. I'm not a huge Bo Nix fan at all in this situation, but I feel like the Broncos defense has played well. They're gonna be able to turn over the Las Vegas Raiders in this one. So give me the Broncos to win, but I will take the spread in this one, and I think it'll be a 3-point game.
Well, what I can say about the Raiders so far, week one they lost, week two they won, week three they lost, week four they won. So
Pattern.
I'm a man of patterns and I'm a man of recognition. They're going to lose against the Broncos simply because they won last week. So week six against the Steelers, they're looking pretty good for me, but they did win last week. Therefore, they are due for a loss this week. So I will take them losing to the Broncos simply for the fact that they had won last week.
Cool. Quick math.
Quick math. That's all we need. Then we have the Cardinals taking on the 49ers in Levi's Stadium. And the 49ers are favored by a touchdown at this 4 o'clock slate. I'll look at the record, but I'm pretty sure that the 49ers just absolutely own the Cardinals over the last decade.
Most
Um,
likely. Yeah, and the Cardinals, I need to see them come out and win another game here. They've kind of been floundering over the past few weeks, and while the 49ers haven't looked overly impressive here, it's really been Marvin Harrison Jr. or bust for this Arizona Cardinals team. They've been very one dimensional, and I think George Mason is going to have a huge game on the ground in this one, and look for a breakout game for Brandon Ayuk in this game. I will speak it into existence, and I think Jawan Jennings and Ayuk are going to be able to go off against this Cardinals team. So I don't really have any doubts that the 49ers this early in the season will have trouble handling the Cardinals. Can they make it a game? Sure, but when it comes down to it, I will just take the more proven commodity at this point, especially defensively and just running the football, which I feel like the Cardinals have not been able to do so far this season.
no. The 49ers have also won the last 4 games against the Cardinals, and it's been just kind of shellackings um, over the last 7 games. So they're 7-3 over the last 10 games against the Cardinals, and these games have been pretty pretty beat down worthy. So I will take the 49ers as well. Maybe the Cardinals show some pride, but I don't bank on that. So give me the Niners as well. Then we have Packers versus Rams. Packers are favored by 3 points on the road in SoFi Stadium. Rams will be without Puka Nakoa and Cooper Cup again, relying on Jordan Whittington and Colby Parkinson. Um, I think the Packers started to gel together, especially in the fourth quarter against the Vikings. Jordan Love being out for 2 weeks was not ideal, but now that he is back, Packers are contenders in the NFC. Rams are beat up. I'll take the Packers to win this game pretty handedly.
Yeah, I will take the Packers to win this game as well. Packers have looked impressive. Their defense has been good outside of that Minnesota Vikings game here, but I will take the Packers to win. Jordan Love bouncing back with what we've seen from Jaden Reed and Romeo Dobbs last week. So see if they can keep up the momentum there. And with the Rams, I don't know why you're scared to say his name every time we talk to the Rams, but Tutu Atwell, just not enough. I'm sorry, but we love him on the show, but every time you mention Cody Parkinson, I think of a disease. I would rather think of Tutu Atwell.
Tutu Atwell is a lot more fun to say. I'll continue. I'll say Tutu Atwell in the future. Then we go to staying in the NFC West. The Seahawks hoist the New York Giants. My question for you: they are favored at 6.5 points. Do you believe that the Seattle Seahawks, with Kung Fu Kenny, with DK Metcalf, and with Zach Charbonnet, Geno Smith, do you believe that they can score more than 20 points against this Giants defense?
Yes.
All right. I'll take the Seahawks to win this game against the Giants, and I think they will win and cover the spread.
Yeah, I think this will be one of those games where the Seahawks just jump out, and you know how their offense just stalls out at some points in the second half. I think it'll be a similar situation to that where they just jump out, maybe like 24-7 in the first half, and they kind of just coast the rest of the game. But not really worried about them handling the Giants there. 6 point spread, kind of wild, but I think they can definitely cover that.
For sure. Then we go to Sunday Night Football, and your grandparents are salivating at the mouth for this game. The Battle of 1975. We have the Cowboys going to Pittsburgh to take on the Steelers. Steelers are favorited at 2.5 in Acrisure Stadium, aka Heinz Field, for the real ones. Well, Steelers offense has looked better. Steelers defense has looked better. Quick math for me, I will pick the Steelers to win this game. Cowboys, anytime they face either a good defense or just a team that, will make the playoffs at some point in the next 5 years, they just look completely lost. The Steelers should be able to contain Rico Doidle. And if they can cover CeeDee Lamb relatively well, Cowboys are kind of fucked, to be completely honest. Maybe fourth quarter they can pad some stats, but I feel like this game's going to be pretty similar to the Ravens game, albeit maybe less high scoring on the Steelers side. But I like the Steelers taking down the Cowboys.
Yeah, I like the Steelers too. And you mentioned it. Break out your laser discs for this game so you can go back and watch these teams' Super Bowls. Well, the Steelers have had, Super Bowls in the 2000s, at least, winning in 2004 and 2007 with Ben Roethlisberger and getting back to the Super Bowl in 2010 and following to the great Aaron Rodgers, who still has not been able to eclipse Ben Roethlisberger in Super Bowls here. But my thing with the Dallas Cowboys is when I think about Dallas Cowboys on Sunday Night Football, I think of a highlight reel, but not for the right reasons. It's more of a highlight of bloopers for the Dallas Cowboys, and I think TJ Watt will be enough to get it done, especially when you don't have Micah Parsons in this game. That is very concerning because you just let the Baltimore Ravens kick your ass all the way up and down the field and shut you down. And I think Mike Tomlin is savvy enough to deal with, um, you know, the fat Mike in Dallas and Mike McCarthy. So I think this will be a good game for Pittsburgh. They'll bounce back out of a loss to the Indianapolis Colts here. And Micah Parsons having a sprained ankle, that's not just a small injury to the Dallas Cowboys defense. That's an injury to your entire defense. And what's a great way to get your quarterback killed? Not having a running game, your offensive line getting older. Combine that with Cam Hayward being back this season healthy, Alex Highsmith, TJ Watt, and Patrick Queen. There's not really a recipe for success if you're Dallas. So please tell me below how you think the Dallas Cowboys could win this outside of CeeDee Lamb going for 205 yards and 3 touchdowns.
Yeah, I agree. Then we go to the Monday night game, last game of the week to cover.
There's not
We have
two
this.
this week. There's only
No,
one.
no, thank
Only one.
fucking Christ. Thank God. Oh my God, was that the most annoying shit ever? Although I'm looking at the future Monday night schedule, they have it again in week 7. Um, don't know why, but that'll be interesting, I suppose. But for this week, they give us a break from Tennessee and Miami or Jacksonville and Buffalo. For some reason, they said, maybe this week we'll let the Chiefs just have the floor. And I thank them for that. Thank you very much. Saints taking on the Chiefs. Chiefs will be without Rashi Rice. The Chiefs are favorited at 5.5 at Arrowhead.
5.5 at Arrowhead. Yeah, I mean, if the Saints can hit a go route in this game, they have a chance. However, I think the Kansas City Chiefs defense is going to be good enough to hold down this New Orleans Saints team. Kansas City Chiefs have still been the Chiefs this season, maybe not offensively, but defensively. They've been a lot more consistent the past 2 years than they have been in the earlier part of the Mahomes era. And they're really taking that Patriots route where they're loading up on the defensive side of the football. They have some monsters on the defensive line and in the secondary here. And Derek Carr versus Patrick Mahomes, he's had some iconic battles with him, but I just think with the Saints team, I feel like that field goal with Young Wei Koo had to be demoralizing. And I just don't think Dennis Allen is really the guy who is going to get that team up, fired up, and ready to go in this game. I think the Chiefs smell blood in the water with the Saints. And I think on Monday Night Football, Patrick Mahomes does not want to get embarrassed by Derek Carr. So take the Chiefs to win this game, especially because I do not trust a coach with the personality of a suburban mom to get his team fired up and ready to go.
I'm going to take the Saints in this game.
Oh
This is a game
God.
that this smells like an upset to me for a couple of reasons. First of all, this spread is very suspicious. 5.5. I'll see how much money is on the Chiefs, but it feels like heavily weighted on the Chiefs. This is a game that feels as if they're due for a loss. You remember a couple of years ago when they lost to the Colts with Matt Ryan? The Saints also have been a team that has been the house of horrors for certain quarterbacks in years past. I think their defense is still effective, and this is a game that smells like an upset to me. Can the Chiefs win this game? Of course they can, but they don't have Isaiah Pacheco, and it's only a matter of time before Kareem Hunt goes back down to earth and relying on Carson Steele. And then outside of that, you have Rasheed Rice, who's going to be out. Obviously, Hollywood Brown's been out all season. Travis Kelsey is not looking like the old Travis Kelsey. And then now it's going to be Xavier Worthy, McCole Hardman, and Sky Moore. I feel like the Chiefs are going to their offense has been somewhat clunky, at least in Chiefs standards. This is a game that I think that they lose, especially with the national outcry over the last few games, some of the calls that have gone their way. This is a game that smells like an upset to me. I'm going to take the Saints to win this game. I think it's going to be competitive, obviously, but I think the Chiefs pull. I think the Saints are going to pull this out. I think this is going to be one of those games you don't see the Chiefs losing, but then they end up losing.
Wow, yeah, you heard it here first. The kid from Toy Story going into Arrowhead and upsetting the Kansas City Chiefs. What a upset alert. But yeah, I could see that happening. I think the Saints defense is good enough. And like I said, if the Saints can hit a go route, you're in business.
Yeah, Rashid Shaheed. That's all we need to know.
Rashid Shaheed is all we need to know here, but there is one last thing we do need to know before we head into week 5, and that is the top 5 teams in the league according to the Brickyard. That's right, the most accurate list in the league. We give you the top 5 worst teams on the recap coming out of the week. Going into the week, we bring out the document for the top 5 teams heading into the very next week. And at number 5 is a team that people didn't really have a lot of expectations for. I knew this team would be better than people thought, but I didn't know how much better. Their weakness was the run game, and they solved that problem because Aaron Jones has been an absolute monster. This team is undefeated, and through the first 4 weeks, they have not dropped a game. Jordan Addison is coming back on this team. They don't even have their star tight end yet for the Minnesota Vikings here. And you have Justin Jefferson, who's been playing out of his mind, and Brian Flores has been coaching the defense to a level that we have not seen the Minnesota Vikings reach since Mike Zimmer was in his heyday there. And we can't say enough about the job that Kevin O'Connell has done with this Minnesota Vikings team. So at number 5, I have the Vikings. At number 4, this is a team that may have gotten an A plus, and they are 500. They're in the top 5, but their quarterback has gotten hurt, but he's back now, and that is the Green Bay Packers and Jordan Love at number 4 in this top 5. With what they have been able to do with Jaden Reed, with what they've been able to do with Dontavian Wicks, and Josh Jacobs hasn't looked great here, but the running game has been serviceable enough. They stayed afloat when their star quarterback got injured. They made Malik Willis look like he was good at football, and this was a team that was an absolute wrecking crew when they went to Dallas. And typically the Packers peak at the end of the year, and Matt LaFleur has been an MVP maker. Aaron Rodgers had some of his best years of his career under Matt LaFleur. So at number 4 here, I have the Green Bay Packers. I think they are hot, and I think they are coming out to take names this NFL season. At number 3, maybe one of the best duos in the NFL, maybe the best rushing duo in NFL history, unfolding before our very eyes. Another team that's 500 in the top 5, but they were a top 4 team last season, making it to the conference championship and falling to the Kansas City Chiefs. That's right, the Baltimore Ravens replacing the Buffalo Bills in the top 5. Sorry, Bills, you only scored 10 points on Sunday Night Football. I had the generosity in my heart to give you the benefit of the doubt that you weren't just being September Warriors against 3 of the worst teams in the NFL. Oh, wait, you were just being September Warriors. But now we have the Ravens, who came out, dominated the Dallas Cowboys, had a tough game versus the Kansas City Chiefs, and now they just came out, won a really tough game on Sunday Night Football, and shine versus the Buffalo Bills. And Derrick Henry and Lamar Jackson are just starting to build that chemistry, just starting to get cooking right here. And I think the Baltimore Ravens are currently the 3rd best team in the NFL. And at number 2, we have the team that everyone loves in the NFL, even though they predicted them to fall off this season. One of the youngest teams in the league this year. And when everyone went small and fast to stop the run game this year, they had a coordinator who had a dream. That dream was to build one of the best offensive lines in the league. I have a dream to get 2 top number 1 running backs in the league, and a head coach with a dream of 2 Pike cold brews with double espresso shots in them, the most energy in the league, the most cocaine flowing through the locker room, the most underrated, overlooked quarterback in the league, the most overlooked defense in the league. When people were calling for Aaron Glenn's job, Dan Campbell stuck with him. And at number 2, we have the Detroit Lions getting back to business with Jared Goff not only having a perfect game and going 18 for 18 on a historic night. We have Jamison Williams saying, yeah, I know a lot of people don't know me, but did you see that 70-yard touchdown I had? Do you see how they can also use me out of the backfield when we still have David Montgomery and we still have Jameer Gibbs, and I am a Swiss Army knife here? Do you not know the amazing talent that is Amon St. Brown? And I will go there and say he is the most underrated wide receiver in the league at this point in Amon St. Brown. And then we have someone in Sam Laporta, where the NFL, you look around the league, where are the tight ends this season? It feels like a down year for the tight end. Travis Kelce is down. We don't have Rob Gronkowski anymore. Heath Miller retired, I don't know, maybe a decade ago, maybe 2 decades ago. And then you're just looking at the Kate Ottens, the Cole Kmets of the world, the inconsistent Isaiah Likely's, George Kittle being in and out of the lineup. But Sam Laporta has been a consistent player for the Detroit Lions there. And just with their defense now stepping up, getting stops when it matters, and potentially having the best play caller in the league in Ben Johnson. At number two, I have the Detroit Lions, and pinned at number one until they show me otherwise, it's the Kansas City Chiefs, defending two-time champions. They are undefeated, have not lost a game. Their defense looks spectacular this season. They have Patrick Mahomes, who's going to do whatever it takes just to get the win and escape with the win. Nothing more. He's doing the bare minimum at this point, but they are still clearly the best team in the league because not only do they have Andy Reid coaching, they have Steve Spagnuolo coaching on that team. And not only do they have the best quarterback in the league, they might have the best interior defensive tackle in the league in Chris Jones on that team, with George Karlaftis also taking another big step forward this season. And they also have the Zebra team on their side in the referees, which is a pretty tough combination to stop. So at number one, according to the Brickyard, the Kansas City Chiefs.
Beautiful. We love it. Perfect list. Brickyard documents, unsealed. We now know going into week 5 of the NFL who shines the brightest among the stars.
Every grade. Every grade for every team. We did it 2 hours and 40 minutes. We predicted every game. We gave you the top 5, and we could go for another 2 hours, but we're not going to because it's almost midnight. But most importantly, when you're thinking about what we covered today, when you're thinking about the NFL season, when you're watching football on Thursday, on Sunday, and enjoying having only one game on Monday, stay
Stay
brick.
brick.